You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 8th part of What If Deku Enters Hazbin Hotel. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of maxx69 on fanfiction.net. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Hell. She sang happily, going into a spin with her girlfriend, taking her aback and dazing her a little bit with this act of hers. Then, after a few spins, Charlie released her grip on her girlfriend and headed towards the entrance of her hotel that served as its exit as well, touched its handle, pushed it downwards, unlocked the door, and exited the rehabilitation center, entering the streets of Pentagram City and continuing her singing there, causing the cannibalistic serial killer, the gay pawn star, the cockroach female sinner, the hellish pet pig, and the one-eyed to approach the door and witness her in this activity, with the pig doing this by following his owner, and the feline performing this act by flying to the needed location. Okay, just don't sing to them, the moth-based female demon requested as she tried to make her dizziness vanish, holding her head with her right hand and looking in the direction her girlfriend went. That bitch is halfway down the street, Angel declared as he stood at the door and set his eyes upon the partner of the Princess of Hell, with him being accompanied by Kiki, Fat Nuggets, the father and the aunt of our young champion, who went on observing Charlie in her joyful singing, with her walking in the direction of the Heaven Embassy, where the meeting she needed to attend to was about to behold. Is she? Vaggie started with anxiety, fearing her partner to do something that was casual for her to perform when she was excited or very happy. And she's dancin', the spider-like sinner stated, confirming the assumption the moth-like female sinner was afraid of. Ugh, no. The girlfriend of Princess Charlotte groaned in tiredness as she placed her right hand on her face, not being able to believe that her girlfriend was once again singing on the streets of the capital of hell. She acted this way not because she hated her singing. In fact, it was quite the opposite. But she behaved like this when she got the information she received just a few seconds ago due to not desiring her girlfriend to humiliate herself in front of the masses of hell. And while all of these events occurred, our young overlord just stood next to the moth-based female demon, continuing to hold his voodoo book that he received from his father as a Christmas present in his left hand and going on looking in the direction where his royal friend went and left the hotel, morphing a smile on his face in the process. He was very happy for her. At first, he was worried for her when she mentioned that she was going to meet up with the leader of the angel army. But after he saw how gleeful and excited she was, this worry was replaced with joy. Not only she was in a great mood after the call with her father, which Izuku thought would be a problem at first, given the fact that all he knew about the King of Hell, which was told to him by Charlie on the day they had their talk, that he didn't support her plan, which saddened her. But she was also finally given a chance to present her idea to someone was in heaven and had a high authority and power there. And due to this, Izuku couldn't help but smile optimistically, hoping that the meeting she had to go to would go just right and the leader of the exorcists would support her goal. As our protagonist performed this, the thought that made him remember back to the fact that he still needed to go to the hero high school he dreamed of learning and appeared inside his mind, making him reach inside his right pocket with his right hand and got his phone out of it, pushing its button on the side and making its screen light up, thus allowing him to check the time. And when he did this, he was shocked to find out that it was around 1 hour before the first class would start, signaling him that it was about time for him to go back to Earth. Dang it, I need to go, Izuku exclaimed in shock as he observed the screen of his communication device, not being able to believe that it was already time for him to leave, causing everyone, with the exception of Kiki, who was too busy hunting the small bug, to turn around and set their eyes upon him. Then, he put his phone back into his right pocket, made a small between him and Vaggie by performing a few steps, opened his voodoo book, chanted the words he needed to summon the portal which he could use to go back to his mother, and opened the portal, thus allowing himself to enter the realm of the living. After that, he closed his book and moved his head, placing his attention on the demons who were at the door, with the main focus of his visionary organs being his demonic parent. "Goodbye, Dad. Goodbye, guys," our young Cambion announced smilingly, saying farewell not only to his father and other demonic relatives, but to his hellish friends as well. "Goodbye, my boy," Alastor said with his well-known grin, saying a temporary goodbye to his son. "Have a pleasant day," he noted, wishing his only child to have a great day, who responded with a thankful smile to his remark. After this, the radio demon and the others who were at the door moved their heads and went on observing the filthy streets of Pentagram City. Looking at Charlie, who got further and further away from the hotel in the process, and Izuku turned his head back to its original position, looked at the gate between the realm of suffering and the mortal realm, and with his shadowy companion by his side, who changed into his shadow form, he raised his right leg and moved it in the direction of the portal, attempting to step inside it and cross it. However, out of nowhere, he was interrupted in this act by his aunt. "Izuku, wait!" the cockroach female sinner exclaimed as she walked towards her beloved nephew, wanting to get his attention, causing him to stop in his tracks, put his right leg down, turn his body around, and set his eyes upon his aunt in surprise. All the while Kiki noticed a bug crawling on the floor from the corner of her singular eye, resulting in her beginning to chase it in order to catch it. "Yes, Auntie?" Izuku wondered with a smile as he looked at his aunt. All the while the loving partner of the Princess of Hell proceeded to head upstairs, wishing to go to the area of the rehabilitation center that was labeled as Crown's Nest, wanting to look at her partner from there. "I made some cookies for you," Niffty declared as she reached into her right pocket with her right hand and pulled out a small plastic bag full of freshly baked cookies, all of them being well decorated and having a red-colored jelly between the doughs, extending her hand towards her nephew, offering him a chance to take it. "I hope you'll enjoy them." "Thank you, Auntie," our dear hero remercied with a joyful smile as he took the bag of cookies out of the right hand of his aunt, being grateful for his aunt's kind action. "You're welcome, Izuku," the cockroach female demon said with a smile on her face. "Now, go, don't get to the school late for me," she requested with a bit of seriousness which she only showed when her nephew was around, keeping her smile in the process. "Okay, I won't," our protagonist assured smilingly, promising his aunt that he wouldn't arrive at his hero school late on the second day of high school. Then, he moved his body around and lifted his right leg once again, trying to enter the gate between the two realms. And while he was about to do this, the pet pig of the gay porn star just observed the whole conversation between the two, focusing his full attention on the plastic bag of cookies, witnessing them with eyes full of curiosity. But those eyes were not only filled with curiousness. They were packed with something else. A feeling that all organisms obtained when they saw something tasty, or when their stomachs were not 100% full. They were occupied by hunger as well. The cookies looked so delicious to him. They were fresh and had exquisite jelly between them. And with his sense of smell that was much better than humans and demons, he could even feel the smell of the fresh-made desserts. He just couldn't stop himself from trying to eat at least one of them. And due to this, at the moment our young overlord was about to cross the portal he created, thus not allowing a chance for the pet pig to taste the cookies, Fat Nuggets took action and ran towards Izuku, with his owner not noticing this due to drinking the beer he had and looking at the Princess of Hell as she walked on the streets of the capital of Hell. Fat Nuggets was in the middle of his running, passing by Niffty in the process, who also didn't notice him due to moving back to the door as fast as she could, thus joining the others, when our dear hero stepped into the portal, disappearing from the vision of the hellish pet pig. But despite this, Fat Nuggets didn't give up, hoping that he still had a chance to get his hooves on the cookies. But as he performed this act, Kiki, who was still pursuing the bug, leaped on the insect and caught it with her paws, landing right in the way of the demonic pig. Seeing this, Fat Nuggets attempted to slow his speed down, trying not to bump into the one-eyed cat. But it was too late. Before Kiki could even process what was happening, the demonic pet pig crashed into her, accidentally pushing her into the gate between hell and earth, while Fat Nuggets entered the portal as well by flying into it after he knocked the pet of Princess Charlotte inside the portal unintentionally, both of them getting into it just before it closed and vanished from existence. Just after this event occurred, all the demons who were present at the front door moved away from it, with Alastor being the one who closed it, and went back to the parlor area, meeting up with Vaggie there, who came down from the crown's nest with the wannabe overlord, who she could convince to step out of his airship and come down to the lobby by using a little bit of force, and wished to make a commercial that represented the vision of her girlfriend, neither her nor the others not being aware of the absence of the two pets. At the moment the portal opened in the middle of his room, Izukumidoriya stepped out of it, entering his room with this act. Once fully outside, he placed his voodoo on the bookshelf, put the plastic bag of cookies on the edge of his desk, opened the doors of his wardrobe, got his high school uniform out of it, placed the clothes of his uniform on his bed, and began to undress, with his shadowy friend aiding him in the process. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to our young Cambion and his shadowy helper, Fat Nuggets and Kiki got out of the portal as well, with it closing and disappearing from sight once they exited it, both of them falling through it and rolling under the bed of our protagonist, stopping there when they hit a long, medium-sized, bluish, grayish-colored bag and crashing into it in a way that made the latter getting placed under the former. Once they stopped in their movement, the one-eyed demonic cat escaped from under the hellish pet pig and looked at her surroundings with her singular eye in panic, attempting to process what had just happened to them and where she and her only animal friend got to. But in Fat Nuggets' case, his reaction to the new environment he and Kiki were in was entirely different. In fact, he didn't really care about the situation he and the pet of the Princess of Hell had got into. His mind was too focused on the cookies that were baked by the aunt of the son of Radio Demon, going on witnessing the plastic bag that contained them with his curious eyes from under the bed, not revealing his and the hellish cat's location to Izuku, who was about to finish getting his high school uniform on his body. After his attire was completed fully, with its last piece being his red-colored tie, which Shadow helped him to tie perfectly, Izuku grabbed the clothes he previously wore, moved to his opened wardrobe, and positioned them inside the furniture, locking its doors once he accomplished this act. Then, he touched his yellow-colored backpack that was kept on his chair with his hands and began to pack the things he needed for school, such as notebooks and a pencil case, which contained pencils and 1 or 2 erasers. Amongst these objects, the bag of cookies was also foundable, with our young overlord grabbing it and putting it inside his backpack, which he didn't close due to him looking around his room in order to check if he packed everything into his backpack or not, with his shadowy companion assisting him in this activity, leaving his backpack on the floor and letting it fall on its back area, thus offering a clear sight into its inside area for the demonic animals under our dear hero's bed. Seeing this opportunity, Fat Nuggets started to rush towards the yellow backpack as fast as he could without a second thought, desiring to finally get his hooves on the delicious desserts. Witnessing the pig's reaction in shock, Kiki began to run after Fat Nuggets, wishing to stop him and not wanting to lose him out of her sight. Unfortunately, her attempts were not fruitful. The pet of Angeldust successfully entered the backpack, getting close enough to the plastic bag of cookies at last, which he was very ecstatic about, with the one-eyed cat following him inside the yellow-colored bag. Just as they performed this activity, Shadow, who, after finishing his search with his master and assuring himself with the fact that he didn't forget to put something important into his master's backpack, to help his master furthermore, levitated to the backpack and zipped it, sealing the 2 pets inside it, taking them aback in shock. Then, the shadowy friend of our protagonist grabbed the backpack with pitch-black hands and lifted it from the floor, floating to his master with it, who was still searching for the objects he needed, gaining his attention and offering him a chance to take the backpack and put it on his back. "Thank you, Shadow," Izuku remercied gleefully as he touched the backpack with his right hand and took it out of his shadowy friend's hands, placing it on his back. Although it was kinda strange for him that for unknown reasons, his backpack was heavier than usual, it didn't really bother him too much at that moment. After all, getting to Ua High, the #1 hero school of Japan, and his high school in time was much more important. But before he could accomplish that act, there was still else he needed to do. Once he positioned his backpack on his back perfectly, he walked to his bed and crouched down in front of it, extending his right hand and reaching out for the long bag under it. After he got his hands on the bag, he pulled it out from under the furniture and put it on his bed, unzipping it and allowing him to fill it with anything. Then, Izuku walked to his desk and grabbed the microphone that he received from his father all those years ago, and he kept it at the right side of his desk, moving back to the bag with it and placing it inside it. After he accomplished this activity, He walked back to his desk and laid his hands on a mini notebook, which contained all the voodoo symbols he could use in his studies, with their effects being written down in 1 or 2 weapons. Not being able to bring his voodoo book into school due to the mere fact that it would be quite strange if a teenager practiced voodoo. The ray gun he got from his demonic inventor teacher, which was modified now by its owner, making it acquire a stunner mode and allowing its owner to switch from stunner to deadly mode if it was necessary. Which Izuku thought would never occur. A needle, a tiny, tiny box that usable to contain cards and dices, a bit bigger box from the previous one, and a few small sheets of papers, all of them being located on the surface or in shelves of the furniture, and put them inside the bag once he moved back to it, not closing it yet. Then, before he could zip the bag and leave his room, our dear hero walked back to his desk once again and touched the hat that he received from the notable kingpin and kept on the top of the bookshelf with his right hand and got it down from the bookshelf, causing it to observe his owner with happiness, judging by the shape of its green-colored singular eye, making its owner adopt a smile by seeing its reaction. After this, our young Cambion walked up to the bag and put his hat inside it, sealing it and separating its insides from the outside world. Then, he grabbed the handles of the bluish, grayish-colored bag with his left hand, lifted it from his bed, and moved to the door of his room, with his shadowy companion opening the door for him in order to help him exit his room. Which gesture Izuku really appreciated. Once stepping through the door and exiting his room, with Shadow closing the door once both he and his master got out of the room, Izuku headed towards the living room kitchen of the apartment, doing this in the hope of finding his mother there. When he entered the room, he saw that his assumption about her mother was correct, which was due to her being present in the living room kitchen and washing the dishes she had probably eaten her breakfast out of. Seeing his loving mother in front of his eyes, our protagonist opened his mouth and greeted his female parent with a grin, revealing his presence to her and resulting in her turning her head away from the dishes she was cleaning in surprise and setting her eyes upon her beloved son, forming a smile on her face and greeting him once witnessing him. After saying hi to his mother, Izuku told her that he was about to leave to go to school, causing Inko to immediately stop the activity she was performing and walk up to her son, insisting the idea of her escorting her son to the entrance of the apartment she and her only child lived in. Which kind gesture Izuku really appreciated. Once his mother joined him, our young overlord and his shadowy helper proceeded to head towards the main door of the apartment, with the former wishing to get his signature red shoes on his feet. To accomplish this act fruitfully, he needed to put the long, medium-sized bag down on the floor, thus freeing his other hand and allowing himself to take his shoes on. But before he could do this, Shadow took the bag out of his hand, holding it up with his pitch-black-colored hands and assisting his master with this action. Witnessing his shadowy companion's kind act, Izuku smiled at Shadow, grateful for his help. Then, he touched his red-colored shoes and put them on his feet, tying their laces perfectly and adding them to his attire as its last pieces. Once completing his clothing, Izuku laid his left hand on the bluish, grayish bag, took it away from his shadowy companion, and moved to the entrance of the apartment, grabbing its handle with his right hand and preparing himself to push it downwards and unlocking the door. But before he did this, he turned his head and set his eyes upon his mother, smiling at her and saying goodbye to her, with her telling this to her son as well. And with this, our dear hero moved the handle down, opened the door wide enough that could let both him and Shadow go through it, and exited his home with his shadowy friend, closing the door behind his back and beginning his journey towards the top hero academy of his country. After leaving the apartment and walking down the stairs, Izuku went on the same way he took on the day of the entrance exam and on the first day of high school, going to the nearest train station and boarding the train he needed. Descending down on one of the free seats, putting his backpack into his lap, and placing the long bag on the floor of the vehicle, all the while Shadow was in his shadow form, not presenting himself to the other passengers of the train. Once the train reached and stopped at the station our young Cambion needed, he stood from his seat, put his yellow backpack back on his back, grabbed the bluish, grayish bag with his left hand, and exited the vehicle. Getting out of the train station he arrived to and continuing his journey in the direction of Yuha High, with his shadowy helper coming out of his hideout and accompanying him in this act. Luckily for our protagonist, he was not going to get to school late, so he didn't need to hurry. After a few minutes of walking, he arrived at the #1 hero high school in Japan, passing through its gates and heading towards the entrance of the main building. All the while Shadow followed him in this journey by flying after him. Once reaching the entrance of Ua High, Izuku grabbed the handle of one of the 2 main doors of the main building of the top hero academy of his country, pushing down its handle and unlocking it, offering both himself and Shadow to step inside. After entering the building and closing the door once both he and his shadowy companion were inside, our young overlord decided to go to the stairs and walk up on them, desiring to get to his classroom. After reaching the floor where his classroom was located, Izuku turned to the right and headed in the direction of the classroom of Class 1A, arriving at its giant sliding door just 1 or 2 minutes later. Then, he grabbed the handle of the door and unlocked it by sliding to the side, allowing him and Shadow to step inside the room and earn a glimpse of the situation that was unfolding there. When he opened the door, he saw that every single classmate of his was already in the classroom, chatting and talking to one another about various topics. The friend group of our protagonist was no different. Near his desk, Uraraka, Ida, Takoyami, and Melo were located, with the teenager imp girl leaning on the desk that was the nearest to her position and wearing her human disguise, not revealing her true appearance to her classmates, chatting among themselves, enjoying each other's company. Izuku was filled with joy when he saw his best imp friend interacting with his classmates. As far as our young Cambion was concerned, aside from him, throughout her entire life, Melo never had many friends, let alone close ones. During the period of her life when she was in kindergarten and in primary school, everyone was scared of her thanks to her special abilities, not wanting to do anything with her. She only had 2 friends, 2 female imps to be exact, when she was young, but her friendship with those 2 imps who were around her age at that time was rather short, mainly due to one of the imp girls being killed during one of the extermination days, and the second female imp girl moving out of the Pride Ring with her family after the other imp girl was eliminated, fearing that they will have the same fate as her. So when Izuku saw that his best imp friend was befriending and interacting with people who were around her age, our protagonist couldn't help but smile at his friend, hoping that she would finally get a few more friends. After witnessing his first demonic friend and the member of the group she was part of, our young overlord moved his legs and stepped inside the classroom, entering it with Shadow, who didn't turn into his shadow form but hid behind the back of his master due to his shyness, and locking the door once both he and his shadowy companion were inside. Hearing this, the group turned their heads away from each other and shifted their attention to the source of the sound, allowing themselves to set their eyes upon our young Cambion, with the teenager imp girl with a human disguise being the first one to speak. "Well, looky who it is," Melo remarked jokingly with a smile on her face as she and the other members of the group set their eyes upon our dear hero. "Hi, guys. Hi, Hensushita," Izuku greeted smilingly as he and his shadowy helper began to approach the group. Referring to his first demonic by the fake name, she requested him to call her by. "Hi, Zuzu," Melo expressed gleefully, saying hi to her best friend as he reached the group. "Hello, Midoriya," Ida greeted with a small grin, raising his right hand up and waving with it in a welcoming manner. "Hi, Deku," Uraraka said with a joyful smile and in a delighted mood, causing our young Cambion to adopt a tiny blush on his face. "Greetings, Midoriya," Tokoyami welcomed, lifting his right hand up in a friendly manner, all the while Dark Shadow, upon witnessing Shadow hiding behind the back of our protagonist, emerged from the body of the raven-headed student and moved his purplish, blackish-colored, twirling right hand up as well, desiring to greet his friend with a high five. Seeing his shadow friend in front of him and the action he wished to accomplish with him, all the timidity the shadowy companion of our dear hero vanished and was replaced with excitement and happiness, coming out from his hiding spot and giving a high five to Dark Shadow, which action every member of the group observed with a smile on their faces. After the sweet interaction between the 2 shadowy beings was done, Melo moved her head and focused her attention back on Izuku, opening her mouth and beginning to speak. "I see you went sure with bringing everything to school," the disguised imp commented jokingly, pointing at the long, medium-sized bag her best friend was holding and referring to the fact that he had 2 bags, resulting in every single member of the group looking at him. "Oh, you mean this?" Izuku wondered as he looked at the bluish, grayish bag. "I just packed the things I might need for the hero lessons into it," he explained. So like, support items? The engine quirk questioned with curiosity as he placed his right hand on his chin. Well, you could say that, our young overlord said as he scratched the back of his head with his right hand. I'm so excited, the zero-gravity user declared with enthusiasm, going really close to our dear hero. We will finally start training to be real heroes, she beamed with pure excitement. Aren't you excited, Deku? She inquired with a smile full of enthusiasm and gleefulness as she moved her hands up and down in excitement, causing our protagonist's cheeks to heat up. I'm excited too. Izuku stuttered as his face became as red as a fresh tomato, and he lowered his ears and tail in embarrassment, turning his head away from the brown-haired teenager girl and covering his face with his right hand. All the while the other member of the group witnessed the whole, with Melo obtaining a smirk in the process, already planning to tease Izuku about this interaction of his with the zero-gravity quirk user, neither of them noticing the annoyed gaze of the explosion quirk user and the jealous stare of the grape-haired boy, with both of those stares being concentrated on our young overlord. And what about you, Hansushita? Uraraka queried the imp girl with a human disguise, acquiring the same enthusiastic mood from before. Are you excited too? She questioned as Izuku straightened his ears and tail, losing his embarrassment and blush in the process. Nah, it's just alright for me. Melo shrugged, then went on with her speech. Whatever we're gonna do on the lesson, I go along with it, she declared, but I do hope we won't have any surprise test like yesterday. The disguised imp girl remarked as she remembered back to the whole fake expelling thing, with everyone sharing her opinion. Don't get me wrong. It was kinda interesting for Mr. Aizawa to spice things up a little bit with this, but it was still pretty fucked up, she noted as she sat on the desk she was leaning to and crossed her legs, taking aback everyone, especially the ex-Sumi student, with her cursing, with the only exceptions she didn't surprise being her best friend and his shadowy helper. Hansushita, Ida exclaimed in anger. It's not ethical for a hero to speak like that, he demanded with seriousness and frustration, performing robotic movements with his hands in the air in the process. Chill out, Ida, Melo said, then continued. Just because I say a curse word once or twice it doesn't mean I'm not a hero, she stated, not losing one bit of her calm, gleeful personality. But it's still bad to say something like that, the ex-Sumi student user declared furiously, continuing to do his karate chops in the air. And get off the table. It's disrespectful for the ones who made these desks, he stated, still acquiring his fury. Oh, come on, Ida, the disguised teenager imp girl said, then went on with her speech. The desk won't have any harm if I just sit on it, she noted. Besides, I'm sure I'm not the first one in the school who sits on it, she pointed out, not calming the nerves of the blue-haired student at all. But it's still disrespectful, the engine quirk user argued, going on with his argument with the disguised imp girl. Meanwhile, the rest of the group observed the whole situation in silence, already feeling that this would be quite a returning theme for those two to dispute. Luckily for them, the little argument between Ida and Melo quickly ended when the bell rang, signaling the beginning of the first lesson and telling the students to take their seats. Hearing the bell, the blue-haired student and the imp with a human disguise finished their talking, and the group they were part of disbanded, each member walking back to their respective desks, with both Shadow and Dark Shadow disappearing from sight, going back to their masters, with the former transforming into his shadow form, and the latter going back inside the body of the raven-headed student. Our young Cambion was no exception. Once reaching his desk and nervously saying hi to his best friend, who was positioned in front of him, Izuku hung the medium-sized bag on the stile of his chair, putting it there instead of the ground to not make any teacher trip because of the bag, and placed his yellow-colored backpack on the back of the furniture, allowing him to descend down on the chair, which was the exact thing he did. Moments after he performed this act, the sliding door of the classroom opened, revealing that the person who unlocked the door in the first place was no other than Present Mike, the voice hero, causing our protagonist to become excited by his mere presence. Hello, my dear students, Present Mike started in a cheerful manner, entering the classroom and closing the door behind his back. Are you ready for the best English lesson of your lives? He wondered with a voice full of enthusiasm as he moved behind the podium that located in the room and witnessed the whole class from there, with them answering the question of their teacher with awkward quietness. What a sophisticated response, the voice hero remarked, not losing from his delighted personality even a single piece. "Alright, today, we're going to learn about relative pronouns," he stated gleefully, grabbing a remote that was on the podium and pushed a button on it, making the title Relative Pronouns to appear in the middle of the board. "So prepare your notebooks and pencils because we're going to have a blast," the pro hero announced excitedly, with class reacting to his announcement with the same awkward silence. Hearing their teacher's request, the students of Class 1 proceeded to acquire their pencils and notebooks, taking them out of the backpack they obtained. Our dear hero was no exception. In his seat, Izuku turned around and extended his right hand in the direction of his backpack, grabbing its zipper and beginning to open it, letting him get access to the insides of the bag. But when he unzipped his backpack, he was greeted with a sight he had never expected in his entire life. When our protagonist unlocked his yellow-colored backpack, instead of seeing the notebooks, pencils, and eraser he prepared for the day, he set his eyes upon the two pets of the hotel, being positioned in the bag and looking right into his eyes, with Fat Nuggets even having a few crumbs around his mouth, signaling that he might have already eaten most of the cookies, which fact, of course, was unknown for our young overlord. The moment he saw the demonic pet pig and one-eyed cat, our dear hero zipped his backpack as fast as he could, absolutely shocked by the presence of the two pets and not wanting to reveal their existence to his classmates. How did Fat Nuggets and Kiki get into his backpack, and why were they on Earth in the first place? They didn't have any kind of abilities that could allow them to enter the realm of the living. He knew that Kiki was able to turn into a small, black-colored key, knowing this information due to Charlie telling him this and witnessing it, but that was it. None of the two pets had the ability to open portals between hell and earth. And when he thought of this, it suddenly struck him. The reason why the two demonic animals were with him in the mortal realm. It all made sense for him now. When he stepped inside the portal, they must have accidentally fallen through it and couldn't go back because it closed. And due to this, they probably got scared and hid inside his backpack, becoming trapped there once Shadow closed it, and thus ending up with him in the #1 hero high school in the country. After he made this revelation, Izuku grabbed the zipper of his yellow-colored backpack with his right and started to pull it, slowly unlocking it and offering him a chance to set his eyes upon the two pets and the objects that were positioned inside it. Hearing the bag being unzipped once again, the demonic pet pig and the pet of the Princess of Hell moved the focus of their visionary organs upwards, letting them observe the son of the radio demon, who looked at them with a smile on his face. Then, our young overlord reached into his backpack with his right hand and petted both of the pets, scratching the chin of the demonic pig gently, then petting the head of the one-eyed cat as well, causing her to release a low purr that was hearable only for Izuku and Fat Nuggets. After that, Izuku laid his hands on one of the notebooks and a pencil, grabbing the former with his right and the latter with his left hand, pulling them out of the backpack and putting them on the desk. After this, he moved his body around and focused his attention on the two pets of the Hazbin Hotel and put his right index finger in front of his mouth, signaling them to be quiet and not let out any noise. Once he completed this activity, he locked the backpack, not zipping it fully, leaving a small hole at the side of the backpack to allow Fat Nuggets and Kiki to breathe fresh air, not wanting them to suffocate inside his backpack. Then, he moved back into his original position, grabbed his pencil, opened his notebook, and began to listen to the lesson his teacher gave the class, all the while hoping that they didn't release any kind of noise during the whole lesson and thinking about what should he do with the two pets. He was not able to take them back to their respected owners due to him not having his voodoo book at the moment and needing to be in school. And he couldn't just tell his homeroom teacher that he needed to go home to bring the two pet animals that unintentionally got inside his backpack back in the fiery pits of hell. And to top it off, he couldn't say a word to anyone in the class about the situation he was in, because if he did, it would reveal the presence of Fat Nuggets and Kiki to his classmates, thus risking the existence of hell staying a secret. It seemed like there was no one he could tell about this. But as he thought about this, he reminded himself that his best imp friend, Melo, was also a part of the class, being the only one who knew about the realm of suffering being real. She was the perfect person Izuku could talk to about this situation. So, with this plan being settled in his mind, he decided to finally focus his full attention on the lesson, hoping that he would be able to speak with his friend about the situation he was in. Once the lesson ended and Present Mike left the classroom, Izuku stood up from his seat, touched his backpack with his right hand, got it off of the chair's back, and proceeded to walk up to the desk of his best imp friend, who was sitting on her chair and was memorizing the information they wrote down. After reaching her location, our young Cambion moved his facial muscles and opened his mouth, beginning to speak. Hensashida, Izuku started, causing his first demonic friend who had a human disguise thanks to the Asmodean crystal. She had to look up from her notebook and set her eyes upon him. Yes, Zuzu, Melo asked, calling her best friend by the nickname she gave him all those years ago. Can we meet at the toilet? Our protagonist inquired. I want to speak with you about something, he requested. Sure, the teenager imp girl with a human disguise responded delightfully, going along with her best friend's request. After this, Melo closed her notebook and stood up from her chair, positioning her body next to our young Cambion. Then, the duo attempted to walk in the direction of the entrance of the classroom, with Izuku grabbing the handle of the sliding door with his left hand and opening it once they arrived at it, letting his childhood friend exit the room first, which gesture she was grateful for. Once she stepped out of the classroom, our protagonist followed his best imp friend in her tracks, closing the door after leaving the room, neither he nor Melo not noticing the observing gaze of Bakugou, who looked at them with irritation and inattention, finding their behavior a little bit strange, but not caring about what Izuku and Melo were about to one bit. After the duo exited the classroom completely, they proceeded to head towards the toilet where they met up the previous day, with Shadow coming out of his hideout and joining their group as well. 1 or 2 minutes later, they reached the area where the toilet was placed, entered the short hallway, and positioned themselves at the walls of the hallway, with Izuku placing himself next to the wall on the left, with Shadow levitating next to him, and Melo locating herself at the right side of the hallway, leaning to the wall with her back, opening her mouth, and beginning to speak. So, what do you want to talk about? The teenager imp girl with a human disguise queried, curious about what her friend wished to talk about. Do you remember when you and Mrs. Darkflame came over and you brought the backpack you and your mother bought for school with you and there was a bug inside it? Izuku questioned, hoping that his friend remembered that event which occurred years ago. Yeah, I remember, Melo answered, then continued. Why do you ask? She wondered. Do you have a bug in your backpack? The disguised teenager imp girl asked with a smirk on her face, teasing her friend in not a rude manner with the assumption that he was afraid of the bug she thought was inside the bag. Well, not really, our young overlord stated, confusing his first demonic friend with his answer. After he said this, Izuku placed his yellow-colored backpack on the floor, crouched down, laid his right hand on its zipper, and started to open it by unzipping it, offering himself, his shadowy friend, and his best imp friend to take a look at the insides of the backpack. When he unlocked the backpack fully, Fat Nuggets and Kiki stuck their heads out of the backpack without a single second of hesitation, shocking both the imp girl with a human disguise and the shadowy helper of our dear hero with this. But soon enough, the shock that the teenager imp girl obtained had vanished without a trace, being replaced with absolute joyfulness and excitement when she saw the two adorable animals. "Ah, hey there, little fellas," Melo cooed as she observed the pet of Angeldust and the pet of Princess Charlotte with her eyes, overwhelmed by how cute they were. Witnessing her presence, Fat Nuggets attempted to move inside the backpack, attempting to get out of it, causing it to fall on its front part, thus allowing him and the one-eyed hellish cat to exit the backpack. Then, the demonic pig moved all of his legs and ran in the direction of the imp girl, arriving at her location in a matter of seconds and setting his eyes upon her, witnessing her with eyes full of curiosity. All the while Kiki came out of the yellow-colored backpack as well and flew to our young overlord, who was now standing, landing on his left shoulder and starting to nuzzle to the left side of his face, purring in the process. "Well, aren't you a cutie?" Melo remarked as she leaned down, extended both of her hands towards Fat Nuggets, grabbed his body with her hands, and picked him up, observing him with her eyes, with the hellish pig releasing an adorable squeak as a response to her remark, "I didn't know you had pets now, Zuzu." She noted smilingly as she placed her right hand under Fat Nuggets' butt and held him to her chest tightly, keeping him in her arms properly. "That's the thing, they're not mine," Izuku declared as Kiki continued to snuggle to his face and went on with her purring. "They belong to Angel and Charlie," he stated as he raised his right hand and scratched the chin of the pet of Princess of Hell, which the hellish cat enjoyed. "Wait, Charlie?" The disguised imp girl started in surprise. You mean the Princess of Hell? She inquired. You know her? Melo questioned in disbelief, taken aback by the fact that her best friend personally knew the heir to the throne of Hell, with her knowing Charlie's name from the interview she had with Katie Killjoy almost a year ago. Yeah, I know her, the son of the radio demon replied, shocking his first demonic friend with this reveal. And this is Kiki, her pet cat, he announced, stopping the scratching of the chin of the one-eyed cat momentarily and pointing at her with his right hand, introducing her to his friend, looking at Kiki and going on scratching her chin gently in the process. And who's adorable piggy? Melo wondered as she smilingly witnessed the hellish pet pig in her hands. Oh, that's Fat Nuggets, our young Cambion declared, stopping and scratching the one-eyed cat and looking his at the pig Melo was holding, referring to him as Fat Nuggets, the pet of Angeldust. You mean the porn star? Melo wondered, surprising her friend with this question. Wait, you know him? Izuku inquired in absolute shock, taken aback by what his best imp friend had just said. How? Zuzu, he's the most famous gay porn star in all of Hell, the teenager imp girl with a human disguise stated, then continued. He's so famous that you can't walk around the fucking street of Pentagram City without seeing a sign advertising him or one of his films, she said, reminding her best friend to Angel's popularity and line of work. Oh, right. You're right, the son of the radio demon responded, giving right to his friend. You're got him right, Melo remarked jokingly, making Izuku adopt a grin on his face once hearing her remark, which smile was acquired by the imp girl as well. But, I wonder, why did they come after you? The disguised imp girl said as she stared and smiled at the demonic pig in her hands, gently petting the top of Fat Nuggets' head with her left hand, which action the demonic pig really enjoyed and appreciated. I think I know, Izuku noted bluntly, resulting in Melo, Fat Nuggets, and Kiki observing him in surprise, taken aback by the tone of his voice, with the one-eyed cat even stopping in her purring and snuggling. And when they did this, they saw that our protagonist was looking at and holding the plastic bag that contained the cookies his aunt prepared for him with his left hand. Or rather, didn't contain it because, aside from 2 cookies, the rest of the desserts had disappeared from the bag, which obtained a huge hole, probably created by the pet of Angeldust. Witnessing this scene, both the teenager imp girl and our young overlord moved their primary focus to the demonic pet pig, who just let a cute squeak in response, thus confirming himself being the culprit in the case of the missing cookies. When they heard this, Melo obtained a small smile on her face and Izuku released a tired sigh, neither of them being able to be angry at Fat Nuggets for the action he performed. What am I going to do with you? He noted as the pet of Princess Charlotte continued to nuzzle to his face and went on purring calmly, resulting in our protagonist shifting his attention to her and continuing to scratch her chin gently, all the while having a smile on his face, not being sure what he could do with the 2 pets and in the situation he was involved in. Well, I think you should continue to keep them in your backpack, Zuzu, the teenager imp girl with a human disguise suggested, causing her best friend to set his eye upon her, since you can't go home and bring them to Hell and both of us need to be in school. And I can't take them back with my Asmodean crystal because I don't know where the princess's hotel is. I suggest you should keep them in your backpack until the end of the day, then bring them back to Hell after you've got home, she recommended, giving a friendly advice to her childhood friend. Thank you, Melo, our dear hero remercied, being thankful for his first demonic friend's suggestion. You're welcome, Zuzu, Melo answered, feeling happy for helping her best friend. Just as she told this, the bell of the school suddenly rang, signaling all the students in the main building of UA that it was the end of the break and the lesson was about to start. Well, I think we should get to the class, the teenager imp girl with a human disguise suggested. We don't want to be late for the next lesson, do we? Yeah, we don't, Izuku replied, not wishing to miss the lesson that was about to begin. Then, Izuku crouched down, put the damaged plastic bag back inside the backpack, grabbed the 2 sides of the top of the backpack where it was opened, and widened the opening, allowing easier access for the 2 pets to the insides of the object. All right, you little troublemakers, it's time for you to get back inside, he requested, wishing the 2 pets to go back into his backpack. Hearing his request, Kiki got off of our young Cambion's shoulder and levitated into the yellow-colored backpack, sitting down inside it and positioning herself in it comfortably. Then, Melo put fat nuggets down on the floor carefully, with the demonic pig rushing in the direction of the bag and entering it after he was placed down, locating himself next to his fellow animal friend. After this, before he touched the zipper and closed his backpack, Izuku reached inside the yellow-colored backpack with his right hand and petted both of the hellish pet animals, with him gently petting Fat Nuggets at first, then Kiki, both of the animals appreciating his action. Then, our young overlord took his right hand out of the backpack, laid his right hand on its zipper, and locked the backpack, not zipping it fully and leaving a small hole at the side, offering a chance to the pet of the gay porn star and to the pet of the princess of hell to constantly have and breathe fresh air, not desiring for their deaths caused by suffocation. Once this activity of his was complete, the son of the radio demon grabbed the handle of the backpack with his left hand and lifted it, raising it from the ground. After this, accompanied by his best imp friend and his shadowy helper, he began his journey back to his classroom, which he and the other 2 members of the group he was part of arrived at after around a minute. At the moment they reached the entrance of the classroom, Izuku touched the handle of the sliding door and opened it, allowing him and Melo to step inside, with a teenager imp girl entering first and our young Cambion as second. All the while Shadow turned into his shadow form, vanishing from the sight of the duo. When they got inside, they saw that every single student of class 1A was sitting in their respective seats, chatting between themselves and waiting for the lesson to start. Luckily for our duo, there was no teacher inside the room at that moment, so they didn't miss anything important. After the duo stepped inside the classroom and Izuku closed the door behind his back, both the disguised imp girl and our young overlord headed to their own desks and sat down on their chairs, with the latter putting his yellow-colored backpack back on the back of his chair as well. Just as they did this, Ectoplasm, another hero who worked as a teacher at UA, entered the classroom and attempted to teach math to the class, thus beginning the second lesson of the day. And with this, the rest of the morning passed by without a hitch. Fortunately for our protagonist, the 2 pets inside his backpack didn't make any noise that could earn the attention of his classmates or teachers, preventing the revealing of their existence. After all of the morning lessons had ended, everyone, not only in Class 1A, but all the other students who attended the Top Hero Academy of Japan as well, went into the dining area of the school, which activity included our young Cambion and his first demonic friend. During lunchtime, they sat with Ida, Uraraka, and Tokoyami at one table, each of them consuming a different meal. After the engine quirk user, the brown-haired teenager, and the raven-headed student finished their dishes, stood up from the table, and went back into the classroom, Melo gave a plastic bag to her best friend, allowing him to place the rest of the food he left in it, with him wanting to give the remaining parts of the meal to the 2 pets, not wishing for them to not eat any kind of food throughout their time on Earth. Once he was done with this act, both Izuku and Melo rose from their seats, left the table, and exited the main cafeteria, heading back in the direction of the classroom, with the teenager imp girl with a human disguise staying outside the classroom, waiting for her friend to bring his yellow-colored backpack out of the room. After our dear hero had his backpack in his hands and stepped out of the classroom, the duo began their journey towards the short hallway where the toilet was located, arriving at it around 1 minute. Then, Izuku placed his backpack down on the floor and unzipped it, offering Fat Nuggets and Kiki a chance to exit the backpack once again. Once the 2 pets were outside, Izuku opened and gave the food he stored in the plastic bag to them, giving them equal amounts, not desiring to give less food to either of them. After the feeding was done, the pet of Angeldust and the pet of Princess Charlotte crawled back into the backpack, letting Izuku zip it not completely, and laid his right hand on its handle. Then, the duo walked back to the classroom and entered it, both of them heading back and descending on their respective chairs, waiting for their next teacher to arrive and begin their first basic hero training lesson. They didn't have to wait for long. After a few moments of waiting, every single student of Class 1A heard a familiar and iconic exclaim, causing everyone to become extremely excited. "And here I come," someone announced loudly, like a normal teacher. The man declared as he opened the sliding door and stepped inside, revealing himself to be none other than the #1 hero and the symbol of peace himself, All Might, making everyone in the classroom to observe him with pure enthusiasm, with this excitement not being acquired only by Melo, who was reminded to the real reason why she was at UA in the first place almost immediately. The symbol of peace was wearing a red bodysuit, with the lower part of the suit having a blue coloration and the bodysuit obtaining yellow parts at both his hands and feet. He was also acquiring a belt around his waist that presented eyes with the red sclere and yellow eyebrows, symbolizing the owner of the belt with it, a pair of yellow boots, and a blue cape, completing his attire. "It's all might," the yellow-haired teenager boy remarked in excitement as he witnessed the #1 hero with his eyes. "He really is a teacher," the male student with red, spiky hair noted, obtaining the same enthusiasm as his classmates. "That's a costume from the Silver Age, isn't it?" the teenager girl with a frog quirk wondered as All Might proceeded to walk towards the podium in a soldierly manner. "Its style is so different, it's giving me goosebumps," the male student with a long, muscular tail remarked excitedly, most of his classmates sharing his excitement. "I teach hero basic training," All Might announced as he observed the whole class from the podium. "It is a subject where you learn the basics of being a hero by training in different ways," he stated as the students of Class 1 listened to his words with pure enthusiasm. "You'll take the most units in this subject," the symbol of peace declared. Then continued, "Let's get right into it. This is what we'll do today," he expressed as he made a superhero pose, then turned around, facing the class. "Combat training," he revealed, holding a card in his right hand that had battle written on it with large, orangish, reddish colors. "Hell yeah," Bakugou exclaimed with a wicked smile and excitement. "Oh no," Izuku said with worriness in his voice, scared of the tone his childhood friend acquired. "And to go with that are these," All Might announced, pointing at the wall that was on the left side of the board with his right index finger. At the moment he performed this act, 4 hidden shelves came out of the wall, each of them having 5 briefcases, with the exception of the last, which had 6 briefcases, with the suitcases having different numbers on them, going from 1 to 21, surprising every single student with their sudden appearance. "Costumes based on your quirk registrations and requests you sent in before school started," he stated, reminding his students to this information. "Costumes," the son of the radio demon told to himself, filled with excitement at the fact that it was time for him to get into his own hero costume for the very first time. "After you change, go to ground beta and meet me there," the symbol of peace requested, then went on with his speech. "There, I will tell you everything you need to know about today's lesson," he declared, then turned around and headed to the entrance of the classroom, grabbing its handle and opening it, allowing himself to leave the room. Once the #1 hero left the room, each student stood up from their seats and approached the newly revealed shelves, laying their hands on their own respective suitcases, with our dear hero and his first imp friend who had a human disguise performing the same act, with the former even grabbing his medium-sized, bluish, grayish bag with his left hand and bringing it with him as well. After everyone obtained their briefcases, the students in Class 1 began to walk in the direction of the front door of the classroom, stepping through it and heading towards the nearest dressing room in order to get into their hero costumes. Izuku was no different. Once both he and Melo acquired their briefcases, they approached the entrance of the classroom and exited the room, with our protagonist leaving the room at last and closing the door not fully by accident, which he didn't have knowledge of. Then, the duo attempted to follow their classmates in their tracks, hoping that by going after them, they could get to the closest dressing room as soon as possible. Luckily for them, they were right. Just a few minutes later they left the classroom. They arrived at the dressing rooms, one for the male and one for the female students, which was signaled for them by the symbols the doors obtained. Seeing this, the 2 members of the duo entered the dressing rooms, both of them going inside the one that was for the people they had shared the same sex. After our young overlord stepped inside the male student's dressing room and closed the door behind his back, he saw that all of his male classmates were in the middle of or were about to finish changing into their hero costumes, causing him to decide to share this action with his classmates. With this, Izuku went to the bench that was in the room, put his medium-sized bag and his briefcase on it, unlocked the locker that was the nearest to him, and began to take off his uniform, only leaving his underwear on his body. Then, he placed his clothes inside the locker, but didn't close its door, planning to put his bluish, gray bag and his briefcase into it after he was done with all parts of getting his hero costume on himself. Once he completed this act, he turned his body around and shifted his attention to his briefcase, touching its locks with his hands and moving them, thus opening the briefcase and allowing him to take a good look at its insides. And when he did this, he witnessed his hero costume inside the briefcase for the very first time, making Izuku put a sweet smile on his face, remembering back to the time when he created the illustration and details of his costume with the help of the daimonic beings who were the closest to him. It was 1 week before the start of high school. At that moment, our dear hero was in hell and was foundable in the Hazbin Hotel, being positioned in the lobby area and sitting on a sofa, holding a pencil in his right hand and observing a sheet of paper with his eyes, with the paper being placed on the small table that was between the furniture, thinking about the design of his hero costume. And he was not alone. Aside from his father, his royal friend, and her girlfriend, every single member of the main cast was foundable, with the gay porn star being foundable on the sofa, scrolling down and checking something on his phone. All the while the notable kingpin was occupying the other armchair and was drinking tea, holding the small plate with his left hand and grabbing the handle of the mug with his right hand, not touching it with his right pinky, thus consuming the liquid in true British fashion. The aunt of our young Cambion was cleaning the dust off of the nearby vases with a duster, and the anthropomorphic cat sinner was behind the bar counter of the caviar bar, consuming an alcoholic beverage with a grumpy expression as usual. As he witnessed the sheet of paper, a trio that consisted of the radio demon, who had his red mic in his left hand, the princess of hell, and the moth-based female demon entered the lobby area of the rehabilitation center, probably talking about a topic regarding the hotel, stepping out of a hallway and letting them take a look at the situation that was unfolding there. And when they did this, the eyes of the cannibalistic serial killer caught the presence of our protagonist, resulting in him widening his iconic grin a bit in happiness, opening his mouth full of yellow-colored sharp teeth, and beginning to speak. "My dear boy," Alastor said as he began to approach his only child, with Princess Charlotte and Vaggie following him as well, causing his son to turn his head and set his eyes upon him. "Hi, Dad," Izuku greeted as he looked at his father, smiling genuinely in the process. "May I ask what kind of delightful activity are you doing now?" The radio demon wondered as he observed his son with his red-colored eyes. "Well, I'm trying to draw my hero costume for the son of the radio demon explained, then continued, "But I don't know how should it look or where I should start," he stated, revealing his uncertainty to his father and looking back at the paper with perplexity. "I see," Alastor remarked, then began to speak once again. "Well, my dear boy, if you ask me, I suppose you should wear something elegant yet radiates your magnificent power," he said with his iconic, wide smile on his face, making his one and only child look at him. "Do you really think so, Dad?" Izuku wondered, observing his father in the process. "Of course," the radio-loving overlord replied, never losing even one bit from the size of his well-known smile. "A true gentleman must do his work in style," he noted delightfully. "I stand on the opinion of your father, my pupil," Sirpentious declared as he placed both his small plate and cup down on the small table and witnessed his pupil, causing everyone, aside from Husk, to set their eyes upon him. "A man must show his glorious might and status with his attire," he hissed, then went on with his speech. "But I advise you to get a good use of the ray gun that I have gifted to you, and apply some fireproof armor for your clothes to have something shield you from the attacks that uneducated explosive hooligan," the wannabe overlord stated, finishing his sentence with anger as the image of the explosion quirk user appeared in his mind, bullying his precious pupil. "Ya should make it bulletproof too," Angel remarked as he looked from his phone and focused his visionary organs on our protagonist, making everyone look at him. "Trust me, Toots, the last thing you'll want is getting shot or getting stabbed," he said, remembering back to the multiple times he got shot or injured during a fight in both his mortal and afterlife. "I didn't know you were that knowledgeable," Legs Husk noted grumpily as he put the bottle he was holding down on the bar counter, causing everyone in the lobby to set their eyes upon him. "There's so much more you don't know about me," Husky Tilda, the most famous gay porn star of hell, teased, resulting in the anthropomorphic cat demon adopting a little blush on his face. "And what would you give Toots as a piece o' advice?" "I think the kid should add a pair of tactical gloves to his costume," the alcoholic beverage-loving cat sinner said, then continued, "They are perfect for protecting your hand from impacts and injuries," he declared as he left the bar counter and walked to parlor part of the hotel, joining to the group. "Plus, you can hit harder with them." "But if I wear them, I can't use my voodoo magic," our young overlord stated, speaking about the fact that if he had gloves on his hands, he couldn't make his fingers bleed, thus preventing him from using any kind of voodoo magic he learned throughout his long training. Then you will make changes in your gloves to have small holes on the fingers, Husk suggested, then went on with his speech. Also, you might get good use of these, he said, then reached into his right pocket with his right hand and pulled some poker cards and a few dices out of his right pocket, with all the dices having an orange color and the first half of the dices obtaining black hearts and the other half acquiring gray hearts that showed the numbers on the sides of the dices, each side having different amount of hearts on them, starting from 1 to 6, positioning them on the table and in front of his nephew. Poker cards and dice, Izuku queried with confusion in his voice as he looked at the cards and dice. I can't use grenades against villains, Uncle, Izuku answered in worry, not wishing to take the life of a single villain. It would kill them. I know, kid, the anthropomorphic cat demon said, then continued. That's why half of these are smoke dice. Throw them and when they explode, they'll act like smoke grenades, he explained. And for the explosive ones, you could use them to destroy walls or debris, Husk declared, attempting to calm the nerves of his nephew with this statement of his. And what about the cards? The son of the radio demon quizzed. You could use those to cut through the guns of your enemies, Husk noted. But I can't throw them like that, Izuku declared, fearing for using his uncle's gifts without proper knowledge. Who said I'm not going to teach you, kid? The alcohol-loving cat sinner stated as he adopted a smug on his face, signaling his nephew that he'll show him the ropes in a similar way he trained him, with Izuku getting the message and gulping a bit of saliva down on his throat in fear, afraid of the assumption that his uncle would train him just like he did during the long 10 months of training. Speaking of your voodoo magic, Niffty started as she stopped in her cleaning, went to the sofa, and climbed up on it, positioning herself at the right side of her nephew, who was looking at her during all of this. I want you to have this, she announced as she put her left hand into her left pocket and took a small needle out of it, extending her left hand towards her beloved nephew, allowing him to take it out of her hand. A needle? Izuku questioned as he grabbed the needle with his right hand and removed it from the left hand of his aunt, witnessing it with his eyes. Since you need to injure yourself to use your voodoo magic, and because I don't want you to hurt yourself like half a year ago, you could use this needle to use your voodoo magic without wounding yourself too much, the cockroach-based female sinner expressed with a sweet smile, referring back to the time when Izuku ripped a tiny part of his index finger to use his voodoo magic to heal a crack one of the minions of Sirpentious. Guys, Izuku started, getting a bit emotional from the kind help of his demonic loved ones. Oh, may I have an idea for your hero costume too, Izuku? Charlie wondered, having excitement in her body from the idea she had in mind for the costume of her young Cambion friend. Sure, go ahead, Charlie, the son of the radio demon responded, giving his royal friend permission to tell her idea. What if you had candies and sweets with you that you could give others to make their sadness go away and make them happy? The Princess of Hell suggested, taking everyone, with the exception of Izuku, a bit back with her idea, with our protagonist being not surprised at all, knowing that his royal friend would suggest an idea like this. Babe, I know you think it's a good idea, but I don't think Izuku would have use of this in his studies, Vaggie said as she witnessed her loving girlfriend, looking at the possibilities for Izuku's costume realistically, but not wanting to sadden her with her reply. Actually, it's not a bad idea, the only child of the radio demon stated, making everyone set their eyes upon him once again. I could even use my voodoo magic and the symbol loco on them to have a healing effect that could make my nausea and headache disappear, he declared, supporting his royal friend's idea, resulting in her smile becoming bigger from the joy she was experiencing. Plus, I could give them to others to make their nausea lessen, Izuku added. See, Vaggie? I knew it was a good idea, Charlie exclaimed in glee, observing her girlfriend with happiness. Sure you did, the moth-like female demon remarked, looking at her loving partner with her own smile. Thank you, guys. I think I now know how my hero costume should look, Izuku said, bringing a grin on every single member of the main cast, even his uncle, although his smile was a much smaller one. I'm delighted to hear that, my boy, Alastor noted, looking at his with his well-known toothy grin. delighted to hear that his son was not perplexed about how his hero attire should look. And with this, our protagonist started to draw the concept of his hero costume down on the paper. All the while his demonic loved ones witnessed him in this act, observing him in his progress, with the radio demon performing this action with a smile full of fatherly pride. After he remembered back to this memory of his with a smile on his face, he grabbed his hero costume and began to dress up into it, with his shadowy companion, who came out of his hideout, aiding him in putting his costume on his body as well. Once he finished dressing up into his hero costume, Shadow flew away from his master a bit, allowing him to take a good look at himself and check how his hero attire looked on him. The design of Izuku's hero costume looked exactly like the attire he usually wore when he visited his father in the realm of suffering, even sharing the same green color with it as well. However, there were 3 key differences between his hero attire and the clothes his father gifted to him all those years ago. The first difference was that the inside of the coat had an extra layer of fireproof and bulletproof material, providing our dear hero with protection against bullets, fire, and minor explosions, just like his demonic teacher and the gay porn star advised him. The second difference was that the coat acquired many pockets in its inner part, allowing our protagonist to carry and keep his support items with him properly and without slowing him down. And finally, the third and last difference was that he had a pair of hard-knuckle tactical gloves as a part of his hero costume as well, both of the gloves obtaining the exact color scheme as the rest of the costume. Each glove having a hole at the distal phalanx of the index fingers to allow their owner to use his voodoo magic without any difficulty and acquiring a voodoo symbol at the back of the hands, with the left glove having the symbol of Loco and the right glove obtaining the symbol of Ogown on its upper area. After checking out his hero costume for the first time, Izuku closed his briefcase and put it inside the locker, turning around and placing his attention on his medium-sized bag. Once he accomplished this act, he grabbed the zipper of the bag with his right hand and moved it, opening the bag with this action. Then, Izuku put both of his hands inside the bag and laid his hands on the 2 tiny wooden boxes that he placed inside the bag that morning, pulling them out of it and positioning them on the bench. Once he performed this activity, the son of the radio demon touched the 2 tiny boxes and unlocked them, showing off their insides to their owner, with one of the boxes obtaining the pack of cards and the dice his uncle gave to him, and the other containing the candies and lollipops his royal friend suggested him to have. All the sweets having a healing effect from the voodoo symbol Loco due to our young overlord using his voodoo magic on them on the previous weekend. After opening the boxes and seeing the things they stored, he laid his hands on the cards and dice and put them into different inner pockets that were on the right side of the coat, separating the explosive dice from the smoke ones by placing them inside 2 different pockets, repeating the same act with the candies and lollipops as well, although not separating the lollipops from the candies. Then, Izuku positioned the 2 wooden boxes back into his bag and got his modified ray gun and his mini notebook out of it, changing the firing type of the weapon from deadly to stunner and placing both it and the tiny notebook inside 2 separate pockets, with the pockets being foundable inside the coat at its left side. Once he completed this action, our young Cambion put his hands into the bluish, grayish bag and pulled the small sheet of paper and the needle, which was given to him by his aunt, out of it, putting them inside the 2 remaining free pockets. After he finished positioning all of his smaller support items into their respective pockets, Izuku reached inside the bag for the last time and removed his microphone, which was the last and the largest support item he possessed, and his hat from it, putting his mic on the surface of the bench and placing his hat on the top of his head as the last part of his hero costume, covering his antlers with it. Then, he zipped the bag he had and put it inside the locker, closing its door once he accomplished this activity. Once he was done with this, he went back to the bench and grabbed his microphone with his right hand, being 100% ready to leave the dressing room. As Izuku and his shadowy helper were about to head to the door that served both as an entrance and an exit for the locker room, they were taken aback and a bit of a surprise when they came to the realization that aside from them, there was no one else in the room, indicating that his male classmates probably finished getting dressed up into their own hero costumes and left the room while he was putting his own hero attire on his body. After shaking the small amount of surprise off of himself, our young overlord and his shadowy friend walked up to the front door of the dressing room and Izuku touched the handle of the door with his left hand, pushing it downwards and unlocking the door with this action, allowing him and Shadow to exit the room. Once stepping out of the locker room and closing the room behind his back after both he and his shadowy companion left it, Izuku began to run in the direction of the nearest exit, wanting to get to Ground Omega as fast as possible. All the while Shadow followed his master by floating after him. A few minutes passed, and he reached an exit of UA, laid his left hand on the door handle of the exit, and moved it down, allowing him to leave the main building and access the outer territory of the school. After both he and his shadowy helper left the building of Japan's #1 hero high school and the former closed the exit, Izuku started to rush in the direction of Ground Omega, wishing to get there to not be late for the lesson and miss anything from it. After a couple of minutes of running, our young Cambion and his shadowy friend reached the location where Ground Omega was foundable, with the whole area of the fake city being surrounded by massive walls and a large tunnel being positioned in front of him that allowed any student or teacher to enter the fake city without any difficulties. Then, once the little bit of shock that both Izuku and Shadow obtained from the mere size of Ground Omega, they jolted inside the tunnel and ran through it, wanting to catch up with the students of Class A1. After 1 or 2 minutes of running, our dear hero and his shadowy companion arrived at the end of the tunnel, allowing him to take a look at his classmates. All of the students of Class 1A were wearing their own respected hero costumes, each of the costumes being unique and beneficial for them, helping them to practice their quirks to their maximum extent. As he witnessed his fellow classmates, Izuku observed their costumes in awe and inquisitiveness, being curious about what kind of quirks they had and how they could utilize them. Noticing his presence, the brown-haired teenager girl focused her attention on Izuku, opening her mouth and beginning to speak. "Oh, Deku," Uraraka said joyfully as she laid her eyes upon our young overlord. "You're here," she remarked as she began to walk towards her friend, observing him in the process. "Uraraka," Izuku greeted, saying hi to his friend, taking a look at the hero costume she was wearing. But at the moment he did this, his face heated up, and a blush manifested on his cheeks, with his ears and tail flattening and him even covering his mouth with his left hand due to how tight her hero costume was. "Your costume looks cool, it's unique," the zero-gravity quirk user praised, then continued, "and I like your microphone and hat too. They really fit with your costume," she remarked, not losing her happy personality in the process. "Thank you, young lady, you are too kind." The microphone of the son of the radio demon remercied as the hat of our protagonist looked at Uraraka with a happy expression based on the shape of its eye, taking the brown-haired teenager girl aback completely with its sudden speech. "What the?" Uraraka exclaimed in shock, never expecting the mic to talk. "Oh, my apologies, young lady, it did not intend to scare you like that," the mic apologized, feeling bad for frightening the teenager girl. "What?" Uraraka stuttered, still being affected by the shock she experienced seconds ago. "My dad has the ability to give consciousness to objects," our young overlord explained as his blush vanished momentarily, lying to his classmates due to not wishing to tell her that his father was a literal demon. "He gave me this microphone as a present when I was 4, he said as he observed with a grin on his face, reminding himself to the time got his microphone from his father. "Oh, I see," the zero-gravity quirk user remarked, still a bit taken aback by the fact that the mic was sentient. "That's really nice from your father. He must be a good person," she remarked, gaining back her previous smile. "Yeah, he is," Izuku noted as he continued to witness his microphone with a sweet, remembering back to all the good things his father did for him just to make him happy and help him achieve his dream, proving to him that despite his dark past, there was still kindness in him. "In my costume's case, I'm not that lucky," the brown-haired teenager girl said, then continued, "I should have written down what I wanted. Mine ended up being a skin-tight bodysuit," she noted awkwardly as she scratched the back of her head with her right hand. "The hero course is the best," the grape-haired teenager boy remarked in a bit of a perverted tone, causing our protagonist to set his eyes upon him with a bit of anger, genuinely hating that kind of behavior thanks to his father always telling him and teaching him to respect and act polite with ladies. "Hi, guys," someone exclaimed behind our dear hero's back, causing him and his shadowy friend to turn around and set their eyes upon the one who shouted, with Uraraka and the grape-haired boy performing the latter action as well. And when they did this, they saw Melo, whose real name was known only by Izuku, coming out of the tunnel and approaching them, wearing her own hero costume. Her hero costume consisted of a black-colored bodysuit with white parts at her elbows, abdomen, and ankles, acquiring the same symbol she had on her backpack on her left shoulder. She had white-colored protective gloves on her hands, which had holes on them to let her use her fire powers without any difficulty. And black boots on her feet, with the soles of her boots being white-colored as well and obtaining numerous amounts of small holes, allowing her to maneuver herself in the air by using and creating flames from her feet and without revealing her wings she had in her true imp form. She acquired her Asmodean crystal as well, still wearing it around her neck as a necklace but hiding it under her suit, not wanting to reveal it to her classmates. She also had a white utility belt around her waist, with the belt having a button in the middle that had the same symbol she obtained on her backpack, and she stored 2 pistols, which she could use due to Moxie teaching her how to handle them, and 4 magazines on it. With the pistols having the same symbol on them like the one she acquired on her shoulder, belt, and backpack, 1 pistol and 2 magazines being foundable at each side of her waist. She acquired a pair of medium-long swords on her back as well, forming an X shape and being perfect to cut through the weapons of the villains. And as the last part of her kit, she obtained a blackish-reddish knife at the right side of her right foot, being placed in a scabbard and gifted to her by Millie, which information, of course, was only known by her thanks to keeping her real job and true reason of her being at UA High a top secret. Sorry for waiting for me so much. It took me a bit too long to get into my hero costume. The imp girl with a human disguise explained. So, what do you think? She inquired, curious about the opinion of her friends about the design of her hero attire. Hensushita. Izuku started. You look amazing, he declared happily, impressed with the hero costume of his best imp friend. Thanks, Zuzu. You look neat too, Melo remercied, being grateful for her friend's praise. I see you got a pretty big from your dad. Huh? She wondered with a smirk on her face, already knowing the answer to her question due to knowing the father of her best friend for 10 whole years. Well, yeah, since he was the one who suggested this look for my costume. The son of the radio demon stated, remembering back to the kind, helpful acts of not his father, but his other demonic loved ones. I'm not surprised. The disguised teenager imp girl remarked, then went on with her speech. He was always so classy about clothing. Yeah, he is, Izuku commented, never disliking the style of clothing his father wore. What about the pistols and the swords? Uraraka queried, pointing at the weapons the teenager imp girl with a human disguise had. You don't plan to shoot villains, do you? She inquired with worry, fearing that her classmate would shoot down criminals to stop them. Oh, these bad boys? Melo wondered, grabbing the pistol at the right side of her waist with her right hand and pulling it out of its weapon pocket. These are filled with rubber bullets, she declared as she removed the magazine of the pistol, revealing the bullets inside it. These things can't kill anyone, but they could still deal proper damage if you get hit by them. The disguised imp girl explained, positioning the magazine back into its place and putting the pistol back inside its stock, then laying his right hand on the grip of one of her swords and drawing it out of its stock, showing it off to her classmates. And with these guys, I could cut these guns of the criminals to pieces, she announced, observing her sword as she told this to her classmates. Oh, I see, Uraraka replied, being a bit relieved after she heard the explanation of her friend and her not wishing to kill villains with her weapons. Well, looks like you've quite armed yourself, the son of the radio demon noted, observing the kit of his best imp friend with an honest smile. Hey, better than safe than sorry, Melo remarked with a smirk on her face, not being bothered by carrying this many weapons at the same time at all. All right, Allmight exclaimed as he stood in front of the class, resulting in everyone present setting their eyes. Since everyone's here, we can start today's lesson, he declared, making most of the students acquire enthusiasm. Meanwhile, Izuku, Shadow, Melo, and Uraraka moved to the front row of the class, wishing to see the #1 hero more closely, with the disguised imp girl putting her sword back to its respected place and with the grape-haired teenager boy performing the same act as well, but not joining to the group. Sir, Ida started as he lifted his right hand, causing Izuku to look at him in surprise, taken aback by how his hero attire looked, finding it really cool and interesting. This is a battle center from the entrance exam. Will we be conducting urban battles again? No, we're going to move ahead 2 steps, the symbol of peace announced, holding up his left hand and making the number 2 with his left index finger and his left middle finger. Most of the time, you see heroes taking the fights on with villain outside, he declared, then continued. But if you look at the total numbers, atrocious villains appear indoors at a higher rate. He stated, sharing this vital information with his students: imprisonment, house arrest, backroom deals. The number 1 hero of Japan listed, going on with the types of shady activities that could be performed inside buildings by villains. In this society filled with heroes, truly intelligent villains hide in the shadows, he announced with a bit of a serious tone, knowing this information being true too well due to all the smart and truly villains he fought throughout his career as a hero. For this class, you will split into villains and heroes and fight 2-on-2 indoor battles. All Might revealed, surprising the class a little bit with this statement of this. Without basic training? The teenager girl with a frog quirk questioned, placing her right index finger on her chin. This is a real battle to understand those basics, All Might declared. However, the key this time is that there's no robot you can just beat up. How will wins and losses be determined? The tall, black-haired teenager girl inquired, raising her left hand in the process. Can we beat them up anyway? Bakugou asked in his casual angered tone, only caring about when he could beat his enemies up. Will the punishment be expulsion like with Mr. Aizawa? The zero-gravity quirk user queried with concern, fearing that a situation like the one from the last day would happen. How shall we be split up? The engine quirk user wondered, going on keeping his right hand up in the air. Isn't my cape great? The blonde-haired teenager boy with the naval laser quirk asked, touching his bluish, purplish, sparkling cape with his left hand and showing it off to his teacher. I haven't finished yet, the number 1 hero announced with a tiny bit of frustration for not being able to finish his speech thanks to the questions of his students, but not being angry at them for their inquisitiveness at all. Now listen. He started as he pulled out a small notebook that had the details of the day's lesson written down into it out of his right pocket, opened it, and began to read it out loud, taking our dear hero a little bit aback with the fact he had a script about the lesson. The situation is that the villains have hidden a nuclear weapon somewhere in their hideout. The heroes have to get rid of it. The symbol of peace explained, then went on with his speech. The heroes need to catch the villains or get the nuclear weapon back in the allotted time. He stated, then continued, the villains need to protect the nuclear weapon for the whole time until the time runs out or catch the heroes. All Might said, finishing the explanation of the day's hero lesson. Teams and opponents will be chosen by drawing lots, he expressed as he grabbed and held up a medium-sized yellow box that had the title lots on its front side in his hand, containing the small papers that would determine who got paired with who and in which team. Isn't choosing them in a way like this a bit hazardous? The ex-Summy student quizzed, unsure of the way the teams would be decided. The pro heroes often have to create makeshift teams with heroes from other agencies. Maybe that's why. Izuku explained this fact to his friend, having this knowledge due to the years of his research about different heroes. I see, Ida answered, thinking about what his friend had just said, the discernment to look around. He told to himself, understanding what our young overlord explained to him. Please excuse my rudeness. The engine quirk user apologized, performing a 90-degree bow to showcase his deepest regret for doubting his teacher's choice of action. It's not a problem, All Might replied, ensuring his student with the fact that he was angry at him. Now, let's get this done quickly, he announced, extending both of his hands towards the students of Class A1, offering them a chance to take their lots. With this, each student walked up to their teacher and put their hands inside the yellow box, pulling their lots out of it that would determine who they were in the same team with and which exact team were in. By the time the last classmate of our young Cambion drew their lots, there were 10 teams in the class, each team having 2 members, with Izuku and Uraraka being in Team A and Melo being the only one in the whole class who didn't have a teammate. Wow, we're on the same team. Hooray! Uraraka cheered gleefully to Izuku as he began to manifest a blush on his face due to her being so close to him and knowing he had to act super properly around her if he didn't want to embarrass himself in front of her. All the while Melo observed the situation with a smirk, almost not being able to resist to tease her best friend about the situation he was in at that moment. And the first teams to fight will be these ones. The symbol of peace declared as removed 2 balls from the 2 boxes that were positioned at both his sides, with the white box at his left saying the hero with black letters and the black box at his right acquiring the title villains with white letters, with him pulling out a ball from each boxes, with the white ball saying Team 1 and the black ball saying Team 4. Team A will be the heroes, and Team D will be the villains. He revealed, and he showed off the 2 plastic balls in his hands, taking the 2 aback in surprise, especially Izuku, thanks to him realizing that he and Uraraka would go up against the Explosion quirk user and the ex-Sumi students, causing him to obtain fear as he thought about fighting against the former. And since young Hansushita doesn't have anyone to pair up with, she will join to Team A as a hero, he expressed, surprising Team A and Melo with this statement, with the latter adopting a huge smile on her face after hearing this. "Fuck yeah," Melo celebrated in glee, taking aback everyone, with the exception of Izuku, Shadow and Bakugou, with her cursing, with the former being used to this speaking style of hers and latter not giving a shit about her at all. "Looks like the big all duo is back together," she said in joy as she positioned her left arm on her best childhood friend and pulled him to her body, which our dear hero quite appreciated. "Okay," All Might said, resulting in everyone shifting their attention from the disguised imp girl to him once again. "Everyone else, head to the monitor room," he requested. "Yes, sir," the whole class aside from the members of the 2 teams responded, going along with the request of their teacher. With this, every student in class 1 has started to walk in the direction of the monitor room, with the exceptions being the members of Team A and Team D. As the student accomplished this activity, our protagonist moved his head downwards and looked at the ground in afraidness, fearing from the mere fact that he was going to go up against his best friend. While he thought this inside his mind, with a worried expression, he set his upon the blonde, spiky-haired teenager boy, who also had his own hero costume on it, and only observed him with anger and frustration, causing the fear that our dear hero obtained to grow in size and look away from him instantly. All the while Shadow witnessed Bakugou with hatred, being angry at him for all the things he did with his master throughout the years. But as Izuku did this act, he reminded himself of all the good things and great support his demonic loved ones provided him with, all of this being done by them to make his dream come true. He remembered back them telling him on the first day of high school that even if the person who had bullied him since he was 4 was at the same school and was in the same class as him, he should try to enjoy this period of his life. And he couldn't allow himself to let his demonic loved by not taking their advice. So, fueled by this kind advice and the good deeds of the demons who were closest to him, Izuku gathered as much courage as he could and clenched his left fist, turning his head and looking at Bakugou with determination in his eyes, taking the blonde, spiky-haired teenager boy aback in surprise by his act and making him grin his teeth and let a low growl out of his mouth, resulting in his frustration become even larger. "All right, Team A and Team D, follow me." The number 1 hero started, making the explosion quirk user and the other members of the 2 teams look at him. "I will escort you to the combat training area." "Yes, sir," the remaining students, aside from Bakugou, answered, understanding and going along with the statement of their teacher. With this, the symbol of peace turned around and began to head in the direction of the building where the battle between the 2 teams would take place, with the 2 teams following him on this journey. A few minutes flew by, and they arrived at the building, having multiple floors and lots of rooms inside it. Once reaching it, the 3 members of the hero team and the shadowy helper of our young overlord moved aside from the number 1 hero and the villain team, positioning themselves at the handrail that was placed near the building at the edge of the concrete road. All the while the symbol of peace went to the entrance of the building and opened it, allowing anyone who was present to step inside. Then, he moved his jaw muscles and unlocked his mouth, beginning to talk. "Villain team, go in first and set up," All Might commented, standing next to the front door of the building. "In 5 minutes, the hero team will infiltrate the building and the battle will start." "Understood, sir," the members of the 2 teams, with the exception of the blonde, spiky-haired teenager boy, replied, acknowledging the order of their teacher. After this, the 2 members of the villain team moved their legs and approached the entrance of the building, wishing to get inside it, just like their teacher requested them to do so. "Young Bakugou, young Ida." All Might started as he looked at 2 teenager boys, causing the male students to stop in their tracks and focus their attention on him. Learn to think from the perspective of the villains, he advised, then continued, this is pretty close to a real battle. The symbol of peace said, go all out. Don't be afraid getting hurt, he remarked as the explosion quirk user moved his head and set his eyes upon our young Cambion, who was observing his microphone at the moment, all the while Melo and Uraraka were chatting with each other. Yes, sir, the engine quirk user replied, acknowledging the advice of his teacher. If things go too far, I will put an end to the battle immediately, the number one hero declared, warning the two students to not take things too far. Understood, sir, Erna responded, understanding the statement of his teacher. All the while Bakugou went on looking at the nerd with even greater rage, grinning his teeth at him in the process. Then, the two students who were the two members of Team D entered the building, with Bakugou closing the door behind his back due to him stepping inside the building at last. After the two male teenagers disappeared from sight, the symbol of peace headed towards the three remaining teenagers, stopping in front of them and unlocking his mouth in order to speak once again. Hero team, I will give you these about the floor plan of the building, the number one hero stated as he handed out papers to the three members of Team A, each of the members receiving one sheet of paper, with the papers having the map of the floors of the building on them. You have time memorizing it until the battle starts. Yes, sir, Tima answered as they nodded their heads, understanding what their teacher said. I will tell you the same things I told to young Bakugou and young Ida, Allmight said. Don't be afraid of getting hurt. Think of this as a real battle, he advised, then went with his speech. But if things escalate too far, I will stop the combat training in an instant, the number one hero warned, not desiring for his students to get hurt too bad. Understood, sir, the members of the hero team responded. Good, the symbol of peace remarked, delighted to hear that his students acknowledged his words. Now, good luck, he said, then turned around and began to walk in the direction of the monitor room, wishing to join the rest of the Class 1A, leaving the three members of Team A at the building, with them starting to memorize the map of the building as much as they could. Meanwhile, inside the building, the two members of Team D continued their journey inside the building, wanting to get to the room where the fake nuclear weapon was placed. 1 or 2 minutes later, they arrived at the door that separated them from the room where the fake weapon was located, causing Ida to grab the handle of the door and push it downwards, allowing them to access the room, with the engine quirk user stepping inside as first and the explosion quirk user entering it as last, closing the door behind his back. After they stepped inside the room, their visionary organs caught the attention of the fake nuclear weapon, which appeared to be a giant bomb and was positioned in the middle of the room, resulting in the blue-haired teenager student moving his legs and starting to approach the bomb. Even if this is just training, it really bothers me to be a villain, Ida remarked as he walked towards the fake weapon. So our job is to guard this, he wondered as he knocked on the surface of the fake bomb, which, in response, let out a metallic sound. It's just a fake one, the ex-Summy student declared, relieved to discover that the bomb they had to look over was just a paper mache. So, that Deku has become stronger, Bakugou noted as he witnessed the door of the room, showing his back to his teammate and not attempting to hide his enraged behavior one bit, making Ida turn his body around and set his eyes upon him. You saw that extraordinary power he possessed, didn't you? The engine quirk user asked, observing his teammate in the process. Although it's a bit strange if you ask me, he noted, revealing his opinion on the special ability of his friend, although finding it interesting as well. However, you seem extremely angry when it comes to Midoriya, Ida said, being fully aware of his teammate's behavior towards our young overlord. How dared that damn nerd act towards him like that? Not only did he get so skilled and powerful with his weak quirk in a short amount of time, but he also beat him in the practice part of the entrance, which position should have been taken by him instead. Not only that, his shitty shadow guard even dared to hurt him by clawing his right hand. That was it. At that moment, the blonde, spiky-haired teenager boy promised himself that in this hero lesson, he would crush him like a bug and show his real place in this world, destroying his dream of becoming a hero once and for all. As this situation unfolded in the building, the three members of Team A went on reading and memorizing the floor plan of the building, with the brown-haired teenager girl opening her mouth as she performed this activity. It takes a lot of work to memorize the building's floor plan. Uraraka noted, observing the paper in her hands. Yeah, it's confusing as fuck, Melo remarked, standing on the right side of the zero-gravity quirk user and sharing her opinion. But All Might is just like on the TV. Uraraka remarked, reminding herself of the kind nature of her teacher. Unlike Mr. Aizawa, he seems nicer and less strict. She noted with a smile on her face, looking up from her paper as she told this. What do you think, Deku? The brown-haired female hero student inquired as both of she and Melo turned their heads towards our young Cambion, both of them taken aback in shock when they saw what kind of state our protagonist, with him even shaking visibly. What's up with you? She questioned in surprise. Well, it's because W were up against B, Bakugou and I. Izuku stuttered, shaking a bit as he said this. Kinda got a bit scared. Oh, I see, Uraraka replied, obtaining a worried look on her face. Bakugou has been making fun of you for a long time, hasn't he? Why, yeah. The son of the radio demon responded, confirming his classmate's question. He is an amazing person and is a piece of work, but his goal, his physical strength, and his quirk are way too amazing than mine. He confessed, belittling himself once again as he thought about his childhood friend, resulting in his shadowy helper and his first demonic friend to acquire a worried expression as well. She knew damn well how awful of a person the explosion quirk user was and how rude he was towards her best friend, and she was really angry at him for that. But she couldn't help but feel sorry for Izuku. She, her mother, and the demonic relatives of our dear hero always encouraged him to not look at himself like that and never give a goddamn thing about the rude things Bakugou told to him. But if a person hears how worthless and useless he is on every single day of his life, it really takes a toll on him. But as Izuku thought about how much he feared Bakugou, just like in the case of the time they were informed of how the combat training would look like, he remembered back all the advice and encouragement his demonic loved ones gave to him, thus reminding himself that he couldn't allow himself to not take their helpful guidance. So, after these memories and thoughts ran through his mind, our protagonist opened his mouth and took a deep breath, calming himself down. But that's why, Izuku started, gathering as much courage as he could, I'm not going to lose, he announced as he adjusted the hat he received from his demonic teacher on the top of his head with his left hand, obtaining an expression full of seriousness and determination in the process. Making the brown-haired teenager girl, the imp girl with a human disguise, and the shadowy companion witness him in surprise, which quickly transformed into joy due to seeing him not being anxious anymore. So, it's like a fated battle between men? The zero quirk user inquired smilingly. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to bore you with this, Uraraka, Izuku apologized, assuming that he might have bored his friend to death with his monologue. You didn't bore me, the brown-haired teenager girl assured, ensuring her classmate that he didn't bore her. We're a team, we help each other, she declared. Now, let's do our best and win this. Uraraka cheered, surprising Izuku a bit with his behavior, but resulting in him losing his afraidness from thinking about him fighting Bakugou and him forming a smile on his face, nodding with his head in response and being grateful for helpful act. All the while the disguised imp girl and the shadowy friend of our young overlord with glee, delighted to see that they were others aside from her and the demonic relatives and friends of her best friend who could support him and make him feel not like a loser. And now, let the combat training between Team A and Team D begin, All Might declared from the speakers, announcing the start of battle and causing the conversation between Izuku and Uraraka to come to an end, with the former obtaining the serious expression from before, ready to battle with Bakugou and show his role model and his classmates what he was truly capable of. And cut, Vaggie announced, ending the filming of the new commercial. She and the other members of the main cast, who, just like Vaggie, were wearing old-fashioned clothes that were mostly used in the 1930s, signaling that they were probably made to wear these clothes by the radio demon, made, with Charlie being the only one who was not present of course. After the girlfriend of the Princess of Hell announced the ending of shooting the new commercial for the hotel, everyone who was involved in this dressed back into their regular attires, with this being done by the radio demon, who gave their usual clothes back by snapping with his fingers, and went on their different ways. With Husk going back behind the bar counter of the caviar bar, Niffty going back cleaning the lobby, and Sirpentious slithering back to the parlor area and descending down on one of the armchairs, relaxing a bit before he could go back inside his airship and could continue building all kinds of weapons. The gay porn star performed the same act as well, walking back to the parlor part of the lobby and beginning to look for his pet pig, calling out for him, hoping to get his attention. But as each minute passed without him finding his pig, Angel grew more and more anxious for his well-being, which became even larger when he didn't find him inside his hotel room. So, after he left his room and closed its door, he ran back to the lobby area. "Guys," Angel started, making everyone in the lobby set their eyes upon him. "Have you seen Fat Nuggets?" he questioned in worry, genuinely fearing that his pet might have gotten lost. "No, we didn't see him," the moth-like female sinner answered, beginning to think on something after her reply. "But now that you mention it, I didn't see Kiki the whole day either," she said, realizing that she didn't lay her one remaining eye on the pet of her girlfriend the whole day. After she came to this realization, she also realized that if they hadn't seen Kiki and Fat Nuggets, it must have meant that they somehow got lost in the hotel, or worse, they exited the rehabilitation center and were out on the streets of the capital city of hell. So, after this realization, every member of the main cast began to search for the two pets of the hotel, with the two exceptions being the anthropomorphic cat Sinner and the radio demon, with the former not giving a single shit about the current situation, and the latter watching their miserable searching mission with delight, neither them nor the rest of the residents of the hotel, not knowing the truth behind the disappearance and the current location of the demonic pet pig and the one-eyed hellish cat. UA, the most well-known and top hero academy in the country of Japan. Only the members of the elite are able to attend this hero high school. During a usual day in the school, all students spend most of their time in their classrooms, attending lesson after lesson, only leaving the room to go to the toilet or to eat their lunch during lunch break. And at that time of the day, there was no difference in this. Every member of every class was inside their respective classroom, having all kinds of lessons. However, there was one exception. The classroom of Class 1A was completely empty, not having a single soul inside it due to the class having their first ever hero training lesson. Or so it seemed. Thanks to moving around inside the yellow-colored backpack of our dear hero, Kiki managed to create a much larger hole on the side of the backpack than the one our young overlord made, allowing her to push her head out of the backpack and look around the room with her singular eye, doing this action with curiosity inside her. Then, the one-eyed cat moved her body a little bit forward, thus making a bit larger hole in the side of the backpack and letting her exit the backpack by accidentally falling out of it. Luckily for her, she landed on her feet in true cat fashion, with her even posing in the pride of her accomplished act. She was about to raise her right paw and begin to walk, but she was immediately interrupted in this act by none other than Fat Nuggets, who followed his fellow animal friend by falling out of the yellow-colored backpack and directly landing on her. Once the demonic pig pet got off of her body and set his eyes upon the room they were in, the pet of the princess of hell sat up and witnessed the pet of the famous porn star with frustration for a few seconds, then shared the same action with Fat Nuggets, not knowing what exactly they should have done next. As they observed the room, the nose of Fat Nuggets picked up a smell that was somehow familiar to him, causing him to move his little pig nose and sniff around a bit, wishing to identify the scent and who it belonged to. And after a few more moments of sniffing, the hellish pig pet identified it. The smell belonged to the one and only Izukumidoriya, the son of the radio demon and the teenager who had those delicious cookies he ate out of their plastic bag. Recognizing his smell, Fat Nuggets decided to follow the scent of our young Cambion. Running out of the classroom through the not fully closed door and desiring to get to his location as fast as possible due to thinking that he still had a few more cookies with him. All the while Kiki accompanied him in this act by levitating after him, not wanting to lose sight of him and getting himself into trouble. While the two pets of the Hazbin Hotel began their secret through the main building of UA High, at Ground Omega, next to the tall building, the hero team began their mission and infiltrated the building by climbing through a nearby open window, with Izuku being the first to enter the building. Him doing this due to wanting to be the first to be ambushed by Bakugou if he performed a surprise attack, thus acting as a shield for the two girls, and with being followed by his shadowy friend, first demonic friend, who had her human disguise on her body, and the zero-gravity quirk user. with the two latter having their shadows manifested on the walls of the hallway due to the light shining through the window. All the while the number 1 hero and the rest of Class 1A, aside from the explosion quirk user and the ex-Summy student, witnessed them in the monitor room through the screens of the countless cameras inside the building. "We're in," Uraraka said quietly as she climbed inside the building and touched the hard, metal floor of the building with her legs, all the while Izuku, Shadow, and Melo turned their heads left and right, checking if they had either bakugou or Ida in the hallway that had a floor and walls made out of squares made out of metal they entered. "Looks like this area is clear," Melo announced, finishing her checking at the same time as her best friend. "Let's go forward and get to the next floor as fast as possible," she suggested, thinking that with this action, they could get nearer to the position of the weapon they had to capture, while Izuku turned his to the left and looked at his best imp friend, nodding with his head in response, sharing the same thought as her. "There are lots of blind spots here," Izuku remarked, warning his teammates of this crucial fact. "We need more eyes if we want to be more careful," he stated, having determination in his voice due to taking the training seriously. "But there are only the 3 of us, Deku," the brown-haired teenager girl noted, causing Izuku, Melo, and Shadow to set their eyes upon her. "How are we going to do that?" she wondered with a tiny bit of worry in her voice. "I think I know how," the son of the radio demon answered with determination in his voice, then moved his head and focused his attention on his shadowy helper, who was floating at his right side at that moment, continuing his talking after he performed this act. "Shadow," he started, gaining his shadowy companion's attention. "Do it," he ordered with the same determination from before, observing him with his eyes full of seriousness. At the moment Izuku got inside the building and saw how it looked inside, he knew he couldn't use his tentacles. The hallways in the building were too thin, meaning that if he had summoned one of his tentacles, it would have blocked their way, thus preventing them from reaching the bomb and thus completing their main task of securing it, not even mentioning the fact that if one of the 2 members of the villain team had attacked, Izuku couldn't have fought them with his tentacles due to them blocking the entire hallway. But despite not being able to summon and use his tentacles, he knew he still had to assist his teammates one way or another, and he knew exactly what he was going to do. It was finally the time for him to use 2 aspects of his quirk he rarely used due to not finding himself in a situation that required it. Understanding and acknowledging the command of his master, Shadow nodded in response and acquired a serious expression on his pitch-black colored face, transforming into his shadow form and approaching the shadows of Uraraka and Melo, stopping between them. Then, he raised both his hands and poked them on their shoulders with his index fingers, thus completing the task his one and true master assigned to him. Then, moments after Shadow accomplished this action, something unbelievable happened. Something that, with the exception of our young overlord, his shadowy friend, and his best imp friend, no one saw coming. Seconds after Shadow tapped the 2 other shadows, the shadow of the zero-gravity quirk user and the disguised imp girl came to life, opening their eyes and revealing their coloration to them, with the former's shadow's eyes possessing a pink color scheme and with the latter having red-colored eyes and a pair of pitch-black horns that were similar to the ones that Melo obtained in her true form on the top of its head. Once they opened their eyes and came to life, they came out of their shadow forms and levitated in front of their master, whose shadowy companion awoke them. All the while the brown-haired teenager looked at the shadows in absolute shock, sharing the feeling with All Might and her classmates who were at the monitor room and observed the event through the camera screen, being shocked as well, especially Takoyami. As Uraraka looked at the 2 shadows in disbelief, with the imp girl with a human disguise doing this act with a smirk on her face, delighted to see her best friend show off some aspects of his quirk that he rarely used due to not being in a situation that required it. The shadowy friend of our protagonist shifted into his normal form and flew to his master, stopping at his right side and causing him to turn his head into his direction. "Thank you, Shadow," Izuku remercied as he looked at him, thankful for his shadowy helper's assistance, who moved his head in his direction and witnessed him with a happy expression on his face. After this interaction, Shadow floated away from our young Cambion's side and positioned his pitch-black colored body between the 2 other living shadows, setting his eyes upon his master in the process. Then, Izuku proceeded to move his jaw muscles and opened his mouth full of sharp, white teeth, beginning to speak once again. "Sorry for summoning you, but I need your help." Izuku stated, then continued, "Go and look around for us. Stay hidden and check if there's anyone in our path," he requested, observing the three shadows in the process. "And if there is, come back as soon as you can," he declared, not wishing for his shadowy helpers to be discovered and hurt, even though he knew they couldn't be harmed due to them being shadows. Once hearing and understanding the command of their one and true master, the three shadows flew away from the hero team and into the hallway, separating from one another after they reached the part of the hallway that offered three separate ways. Shortly after their leave, Izuku turned his head and focused his attention on his best imp friend, beginning to speak. "Hensushita, could you please hold my hat for me? I don't want it to be destroyed," our dear hero requested with a smile on his face as he took his hat off of his head, not wishing to damage one of the two gifts of his demonic inventor teacher with the activity he was about to do. "Sure, Zuzu," the imp girl with a human disguise replied with a kind attitude, taking the hat of our protagonist out of his right hand. "Thank you, Hensushita," Izuku thanked, then turned his head away from Melo and moved it downwards, setting his eyes upon the floor of the building. After this, our young overlord took a deep breath and released it, starting to concentrate on the ability he was about to use. As he concentrated more and more, his antlers began to grow in size a bit, acting as kind of an inverse radio antenna, which, instead of emitting radio waves, gathered all the things that the three shadows saw in Izuku's head as mental images, and signaling that he was almost ready to use this ability of his, surprising Uraraka and causing Melo to grin at him with this. Then, as his antlers stopped growing, Izuku opened his eyes wide, with his eyes not acquiring the usual green coloration, but instead possessing a look that was similar to the flickering of the screen of an old-fashioned TV, accompanied by the sound of radio static as well. And while our young Cambion performed this act, his vision drastically changed, not seeing his two teammates when he unlocked his eyes. Instead, he saw with the eyes of shadow, thus allowing him to observe what his shadowy helper witnessed. Fortunately, there was no sign of the explosion quirk user and the ex-Sumi student, thus making Izuku think that the hallway they planned to go through was safe. But just in case, he switched his vision from shadows to Melo's shadow, checking if there was any kind of enemy activity in its area, which was not the case. Or so he thought. Because, in the corner of a hallway, a certain blonde, spiky-haired teenager boy was hiding, being failed to be noticed by both Izuku and his shadowy companions, waiting to ambush the hero team, with his main target being the nerd he hated. After being sure that no one was in their path, our protagonist stopped this ability of his and changed back into his causal look, with his eyes requiring their original look and his antlers decreasing back to their normal size. All the while his shadowy helpers started to fly back to his location, being done with their search. Then, he set his eyes on his teammates, opening his mouth and beginning to talk. "There's no one in our way. It's safe," the son of the radio demon announced as the three shadows came back to the hero team, with Melo stepping up to our dear hero and offering him a chance to take his hat back. "How did you do that, Deku?" Uraraka wondered, taken aback by the action that our protagonist accomplished. "I can see with the eyes of the shadows I control," Izuku explained. "Although I can only switch between two shadows, it's very useful," he noted, witnessing his teammate with a smile. "Oh, I see," the zero-gravity quirk user replied, surprised by the fact that our dear hero had abilities aside from shadow and his tentacles. "I'm sorry to interrupt this little chit-chat, but I think we should go," Melo said, causing everyone present in the area to look at her. "We still have a fake bomb to capture," she stated, reminding her friends of the main point of their mission. "Oh, right," our young Cambion responded as he let out an awkward chuckle, scratching the back of his head with his left hand in shyness. "Let's go, everyone," he said, gaining a nod from both his first demonic friend and the brown-haired teenager girl in response. And thus, while accompanied by the three living shadows, the hero team began their journey inside the building, with Izuku leading the way and two girls and the three shadows keeping little distance from his, with the three formers wishing to get to the fake bomb as soon as they could and being on full alert, preparing themselves for a possible surprise attack. And truth be told, they were lucky they did this. Because, as they reached the corner of one of the hallways, suddenly, the explosion quirk user jumped out of the hallway, revealing his presence to our group and taking them by surprise. Then, he aimed his right hand in their direction and released an explosion, thus attacking them and wishing to harm them. Fortunately for them, they reacted to Bakugou's ambush in time. At the moment of his attack, the disguised imp girl dodged the explosion by flying out of its radius with flames coming out of her feet, and Izuku leaped away from the explosion and lunged himself at the zero-gravity quirk user, getting her out of the way of the explosion and shielding her from it. "Uraraka, Hensashida, are you okay?" Izuku questioned with concern about his teammates' current condition. "I'm fine," Melo answered as she lifted her arms and opened her palms, forming a battle stance and she could use her special ability when needed. "I'm okay, thanks," Uraraka responded with worry in his voice, then set her eyes on our young overlord. "And you, Deku?" "I'm all right," our dear hero replied as he got off of the body of the brown-haired teenager girl and flattened his ears and tail a bit due to Bakugou's presence, assuring his teammates that he didn't suffer any injury, with this being thanked for his bulletproof, fireproof, and minor explosion-proof hero costume. "Well, look at that, Deku," Bakugou said as he swept the smoke away from his face with his left hand, allowing him to see the members of the hero team, who looked at him with a mixture of worry and determination. "You dodged it, didn't you?" he remarked, continuing to look at our protagonist. "I figured you would come for me first," the son of the radio demon responded, observing his childhood friend in the process and raising his fists, ready to fight and shaking a bit from the frankness he was experiencing. All the while all three shadows went into protective mode, each of them growing talons on their hands and opening their mouths full of sharp, pointed, pitch-black teeth, with Uraraka's shadow and shadow acquiring red-colored and shadow making his antlers reach their full size. "I won't do much damage that this fight stops, but I'm gonna get close," the spiky, blonde-haired teenager boy announced with an evil smirk on his face, rushing in the direction of our dear hero as he raised his right hand, ready to strike with it. But then, something happened that really surprised him. At the moment he was about to release an explosion, the son of the radio demon threw his microphone into his shadowy companion's hands, who caught it and was taken aback by this action, ran forward, and grabbed the explosion quirk user's arm, stopping him from performing his attack. "Wow, just like a pro hero," the brown-haired female student noted as she, the imp girl with a human disguise, and the three shadows observed our protagonist in action. Then, Izuku turned his body around, bent his knees, and focused all his weight on his hips, preparing to throw him. All the while Bakugou just watched this in pure shock, not understanding the whole situation. How did the nerd know he was going to do that? Did he just read his moves? He had to know how. But he didn't have time to think about this. By the time he could even figure out how our young overlord performed this activity, Izuku lifted him into the air and smacked him into the floor by using a technique his uncle taught him, causing Bakugou to groan in pain from the impact. Kaken, Izuku started as his childhood friend sat up on the floor and set his eyes upon him. "You always start with a right swing," he noted as he witnessed the floor, then continued. "How much do you think I've been watching you?" our young Cambion questioned, taking breaths in order to slow down his pulse. "I've been writing notes about heroes into a notebook for years." "Into the notebook that you almost destroyed," he declared, thinking back to the day when the spiky, blonde-haired teenager boy nearly burned his notebook to shreds. "I'm not the useless Deku anymore, Kaken," the son of the radio demon proclaimed, raising his head and looking at his, "From now on, the word Deku is the name of a true hero," he announced with determination and bravery as he stood into a fighting pose, surprising both Melo and Uraraka with this announcement, with the former forming a proud smile on her face, feeling pride for her best friend for standing up against his bully. But despite the determination he was showcasing, our protagonist was still shaking and still had his ears and tail lowered. He was filled with fear, and for no reason. Throughout his whole life, since he was young, Bakugou had bullied him, even after his quirk awakened. So standing up against the one who made his life a living hell was not easy in the slightest. He could feel that his brain told him to stop what he was doing, telling him to give up in the hope of Bakugou not hurting him if he did that. But he dismissed that plan for one single reason. He couldn't let his demonic loved ones down. They encouraged and helped him so much, and if he had just given in to his fear of Kaken, it would have rendered their assists to nothingness, and he couldn't allow that. So, fueled by the kind actions of demonic loved ones and the nice actions of his friends, both old and new, He decided to show his childhood friend that he was not an insecure teenager anymore, but a confident boy who was driven to be a true hero and would not let a bully like him traumatize him and stand in the way of his dream. Seeing this sudden bravery in the nerd he hated, fury began to inhabit the spiky, blonde-haired teenager boy's body. This nerd not only dared to topple him in the entrance exam and be the first in ball throwing, but also had the balls to stand up against him and battle with him. That was it. He just couldn't take it anymore. He had to teach the nerd a lesson where he will truly learn his place in the world, at the bottom, where he belonged. Deku, the explosion quirk user, started with pure rage in his voice, lifting both of his hands up. Despite being scared, you still stand up against me, he remarked with growing anger as he created a few tiny explosions in his right palm. That's what I hate in you, Bakugou shouted at our dear hero with absolute hatred, observing him with rageful eyes, trying to scare Izuku with this, which worked, but our young overlord didn't show it. Seeing that the verbal warning didn't work, Bakugou thought it was time for the physical one. He moved his left arm and aimed his open left palm to the floor, being about to take off into the air with an explosion. Seeing this, Izuku quickly shifted his attention from him and set his upon his teammates, opening his mouth and beginning to speak. Uraraka, Hensashida, go, our young Cambion ordered, wanting his friends to get to safety. Your shadows will protect you. I'll catch up to you in a minute, he said, commanding this task to the other shadows as Melo and Uraraka began to run away from the scene. And what about you, Zuzu? The disguised imp girl inquired as she rushed next to Uraraka and two living shadows, who turned back into their normal, not protective forms, worrying for her best friend. Don't worry about me, I'll handle him, the son of the radio demon assured as his teammates left the area, leaving him and Shadow, who was still in protective form, to be up against Bakugou. At the moment these words left his mouth, the explosion quirk user released a big explosion from his left palm, launching himself into the air and towards the nerd, lifting his left leg and attempting to kick our young Cambion's head, which luckily he blocked. Handle me? I'll see you try that, Bakugou noted, witnessing the nerd in the process. But as he performed this act, he made a shocking discovery. When he looked at our protagonist, he saw him wrapping the capture tape around his legs, wishing to catch him with it by using the technique their home teacher, Eraserhead, used, which Izuku knew from the notes he wrote about him. Yes, he couldn't see him doing that in person, which was unfortunate, but his notes came useful nonetheless. In an attempt to free his leg from the capture tape, Bakugou swung with his right hand at our young overlord, releasing an explosion in the process. In response, our young Cambion dodged the explosion by teleporting to the side with the help of his shadowy friend, thus creating distance between him and the spiky, blonde-haired teenager boy. Then, our protagonist put his capture tape away and set his eyes upon his childhood friend, with his shadowy friend sharing this action with him as well, waiting for the next move of Bakugou, knowing that due to predicting his two attacks, he grew cautious. And soon, that activity came. Seeing the position of the nerd he had been bullying for the past 10 years, the explosion quirk user moved his arms downwards and opened his hands, aiming his palms towards the floor, being about to launch himself into our young overlord's direction. Witnessing this act, the son of the radio demon reached inside his coat, pulled out one of the smoke dices that his uncle gave him, activated it, and threw it to the ground, creating a huge cloud of smoke, hiding himself in Shadow, who was still holding the microphone of his master, inside it and surprising both the spiky, blonde-haired teenager boy, All Might, and the rest of his classmates who were in the monitor room. Once shaking the surprise off of himself, Bakugou jolted towards the smoke and entered it, wishing to get to the location where our young Cambion was moments ago. But to his shock, there was no sight of Izuku's presence, meaning that he teleported out of the smoke and left the area with his shadowy helper right after he threw the smoke dice. Realizing this, the explosion quirk user ran out of the smoke and looked around the area, beginning to rush in the direction of one of the nearby hallways. But when he left the hallway, he was greeted by multiple other hallway entrances, meaning that our dear hero could have taken any of them, thus making the spiky, blonde-haired think that it was almost impossible for him to find him, resulting in his frustration and anger manifest in an even larger size and him opening his mouth in order to release his fury. You enjoyed toying with me, didn't you? Bakugou questioned with rage in his voice, then continued. "You've got a powerful quirk, aren't you?" he queried. "If it's that strong, then come back and try to get me with it." The explosion quirk user demanded loudly, wanting the nerd to hear his request, all the while creating a bunch of small explosions in his hands in his frustration, wishing to prove him that he was better than him. And indeed the son of the radio demon heard his demand. As he ran through the hallway, desiring to get away from the spiky, blonde-haired as fast and much as possible, his auditory organs picked up Bakugou's shouting, causing him to grin his teeth in a mixture of anxiety and a tiny, tiny bit of anger. He knew that Kaken wanted to fight him only because he wanted to show him he was better than him. Of course, he was afraid to do this, being mostly against it due to fearing him because of the bullying. But he knew that due to the hero lesson they had that day, and in order to accomplish his team's mission, and most importantly, to not let down his demonic loved ones by not standing up for himself, the fight between them was unavoidable. But in order to defeat Bakugou, he needed to plan. And as he began to think about a proper plan, an idea popped up in his mind. An idea that included both him clashing with the explosion quirk user, and his team accomplishing their main task of catching the bomb. And to make that plan into reality, he had to share his plan with his teammates. But to that, he had to meet up with them. So, in an attempt to accomplish this act, our young overlord moved his left hand and touched the small wireless radio with it, proceeding to speak. "Uraraka, where are you?" Izuku asked, contacting his teammates using the small wireless radio. "We're on the second floor." Uraraka replied through the radio, "We're about to get to the third floor." "Where are you right now, Deku?" she wondered from the only male member of the hero team. "I'm a floor below you." The son of the radio demon responded, "Stay where you are, I'm heading to you right now," he requested, then continued. "Then, we can discuss our next move," Izuku stated, wishing to tell his plan to his teammates. "Okay." The zero-gravity quirk user answered, acknowledging the request of her teammate. And with this, both our dear hero and the brown-haired teenager girl removed their hands from their radios and ended their conversation, with the former rushing in the direction of the second floor, desiring to catch up with teammates as fast as possible. As these events unfolded, the rest of Class 1A witnessed the camera screens with interest, being curious about the outcome of this battle, with their curiosity being shared by the symbol of peace as well. Despite meeting him almost a year ago and knowing what his quirk was and how it operated, he knew little about Izuku. Of course, judging by what he told him and by how he controlled his quirk during the practical exam, our protagonist had a very great potential of becoming a hero. But by hearing the conversations between Izuku and Bakugou, it seemed to him that they had a shared past, causing him to believe that there was much more to Bakugou's violent behavior towards him than just wanting to win the battle. Meanwhile, as the #1 hero of Japan continued to observe the screen with interest and quietness, sharing this action with the members of Class 1A who were present inside the monitor room, unbeknownst to any of them. The two hellish pets of the Hazbin Hotel finally reached Ground Omega, jolting through the long tunnel that served as the entrance of the battleground and entering the fake with this act, with Fat Nuggets being the one who got inside the area, followed shortly after by the one-eyed demonic pet cat. Once both of them were inside Ground Omega and Kiki caught up with the pet of the famous gay porn star, she slowly lowered her body and touched the ground with her white-furred fluffy paws, landing right next to Fat Nuggets, who was standing in one place and was looking at the new place he and her fellow animal friend arrived to, catching her breath due to getting tired from flying after the demonic pig for quite some time. But Fat Nuggets? He was not tired. He didn't even possess a single sweat on his forehead. Instead, he was full of energy, ready to continue his journey in the direction of the boy who accidentally got him to the world of the living in the first place. But as he was about to do that, his nose picked up another type of smell. Sensing this, he sniffed with his pig nose, smelling the air and attempting to process the information the smell had for him. And when he performed this action, the pet of angeldust realized it was not the smell of a single person. Moreover, it seemed to him that there were scents of multiple people in the area, most of which led towards the same location. This made Fat Nuggets think if there were more people in the area, there was a higher chance for him to get a cookie, with him thinking this due to having the thought of Izuku being amongst the group of people as well. So, with this he decided to follow the smells of multiple people, wishing to get a cookie he could consume. Seeing the hellish pig rush from her side, The feline pet of the Princess of Hell rolled her singular eye in annoyance, not believing that the only thing that Fat Nuggets was still thinking about were the cookies, and flew after him, neither of them knowing the fact that they were heading right in the direction of the monitor room, where most of Class 10 was foundable. As all these events transpired inside the building, the son of the radio demon finally reached the location of his teammates, who were at the beginning of the stairs that could have led them to the next floor, setting his eyes upon them. And when he did this, he proceeded to unlock his mouth and begin to speak, wishing to get the attention of the disguised imp girl, the zero-gravity quirk user, and the two shadows. "Hensashita, Uraraka," Izuku exclaimed in a tone that was not too loud, but loud enough for his teammates and the two sentient shadows to hear him as he ran towards them, causing them to turn their heads around and lay their eyes upon him. "Deku," Uraraka said in relief, glad to see her friend to be in one shape. "Thank goodness you're all right," Melo remarked happily, relieved to witness her best friend in one piece. "That explosive asshole almost got you, didn't he?" "Yeah, I managed to get away from Kakin, but it's only a matter of time before he catches up with us," our young overlord noted, acknowledging the fact that his bully wouldn't give up on fighting and defeating him that easily. "Then what are we going to do now?" The brown-haired teenager girl wondered with signs of worry in her voice. "I know," the adolescent imp girl with a human disguise announced, making everyone present focus their attention on her. "Since we're all together now, let's find the bomb, kick Ida's and Bakugou's asses, retrieve the bomb, and call it a day," she suggested, desiring to beat the explosion quirk user's butt at last for the bullying he performed on her dearest friend. "No, that's not good," Izuku noted. "If we do that, Kakin would immediately come after us and we would become surrounded," he stated, knowing that despite them having the advantage in numbers, the spiky, blonde-haired teenager boy was talented enough to battle two of them at the same time. "Then what?" Melo inquired. "I have a plan," Izuku declared, then continued. "But before we do that, I need to know if you'll go along with it or not." "Whatever it is, I'll go along with your plan, Zuzu." "Me too, Deku. You can count on us." "Thanks, guys," the son of the radio demon replied with a small smile on his face, glad to hear that his teammates were eager to go along with his plan. And with their approval, Izuku proceeded to begin his plan, just like he thought it out. At his first step, he reached inside his coat and got his tiny notebook out of it, opening it and searching for the voodoo symbol he needed. Once he found the symbol that had the effect he needed at that moment and memorized its name and how it looked, he put his small notebook back into its original place and placed both of his hands inside his coat, grabbing two tiny papers with his right hand and the needle he was given by his aunt with his left hand, holding the former between his right index, middle, and ring fingers. Then, he moved the needle to the end of his right index finger, took a deep breath, and pierced the skin of his finger with it, causing him to flinch at the pain and resulting in a tiny amount of blood leaking out of the wound, taking aback Uraraka, All Might, and the rest of Class 1A with this action of his. After he accomplished this act, he put his needle away, touched the papers with his left hand, and drew the voodoo symbol on one of the papers, repeating the same activity with the other paper as well. Once he completed this act, he positioned his right hand above the papers and opened his palm, chanting the name of the voodoo symbol after he did this, causing the symbols to glow in a green light, signaling to our protagonists that they were ready for activation. Then, he moved his left hand and extended it towards his two teammates, offering them a chance to grab them, opening his mouth, and beginning to speak in the process. "Take these papers and go up to the 3rd floor. After you find Ida, say Aizen and secure the bomb as fast as possible. Your shadows will protect you," he requested, explaining his plan to his teammates and assigning a new task for the two shadows that he summoned at the beginning of the lesson. Hearing his request, both girls grabbed the papers and put them into their right pockets, focusing their attention back on Izuku after they were done with this. "Oh, and before I forget, take these candies too," Izuku added, putting his right hand inside his coat and pulling two out of the many candies that Princess Charlotte suggested him to have out of it, offering them to the two female adolescents. "Candies?" Melo wondered in confusion. "They are good for nausea and headaches. Just eat them and the pain will vanish immediately," the son of the radio demon explained. "And what about you, Deku?" Uraraka asked as she and Melo took the candies out of Izuku's hands and put them into their left pockets. I'll stay here and I'll try to keep Kaken busy as much as possible, he stated, revealing his role in his plan. Are you fucking nuts? The disguised imp girl questioned with disbelief, not surprising Izuku and Shadow at all with her style of speaking at all. Then going on with her speech, that kid is a fucking walking dynamite. Are you really sure you want to go toe-to-toe with him all by yourself? She queried, worrying for her best friend's well-being. Yes, I'm sure, Izuku replied with determination, wishing to show his childhood friend that he was not the weak adolescent anymore, but a student at Yua High who wished to become a pro hero, causing the disguised imp girl to morph a smile on his face, delighted to see her best friend being determined to stand up against his bully. Just as our protagonist said this, a sudden noise was let out, resulting in everyone present turning their heads in the direction the sound came from, allowing themselves to set their eyes on none other than Bakugou himself. They're loaded, the explosion quirk user said as he lifted his right hand up, showing off his grenade-shaped gauntlet. All the while the zero-gravity quirk user adopted a worried expression on her face. Melo formed the battle stance she did when the team encountered Bakugou for the first time, and the three sentient shadows went into their protective modes. Kaken, Izuku said as his best imp friend grinned her teeth in anger, being ready to finally battle with the asshole that bullied her best friend for so many years. Why won't you use your quirk? The spiky, blonde-haired teenager boy wondered, then continued, if it's that powerful, why are you afraid of using it on me? With an evil grin on his face. Are you taking me as a joke? He questioned. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Kaken, the son of the radio demon declared as he took a battle stance, shaking a bit from the fear he had for Bakugou for a long time. Yeah, he's through your bullshit, the imp girl with a human disguise declared. So you better surrender now before we kick your ass so much you won't be able to sit down for a month, she warned, being ready to go toe-to-toe with Bakugou. Hearing the replies of the nerd and his little friend, the explosion quirk user became more agitated, grinning his teeth in frustration, desiring to finally shut up the mouth of the nerd and make his bravery disappear. But then, an idea appeared in his mind. An idea that could make Izuku's confidence shatter into a million pieces and could show the nerd's female friend that he was not someone to mess with, causing him to obtain a malicious smile once again. So, with this idea in his mind, he moved his right hand and pointed his gauntlet at the hero team, talking to Izuku in the process. Since you know so much about me, you probably know that my quirk, Explosion, lets me secrete nitroglycerin like sweats from the sweat glands on the palm of my hand and make it explode. Bakugou explained as he pulled the upper part of his right grenade-shaped gauntlet back, revealing a pin with it, and with the right equipment, it could be stored to then, he added, then bent his knees a bit, lowering his body a bit and putting his right index finger on the pin, making both our protagonist and the symbol of peace realize what he was about to do. Young Bakugou, what are you doing? All Might inquired with worry through the wireless radio. Don't kill them. They will survive if they dodge it. The spiky, blonde-haired male adolescent replied with the same evil grin, slowly beginning to pull the pin out of its place. Uraraka, Hensashida, run! Our dear hero commanded, not desiring for his teammates to get hit by the soon-coming attack. Uraraka didn't have to be told twice. She ran up the stairs as fast as she could, accompanied by her and Melo's shadow, not wishing to get hit by the explosion that was about to be released. And just as she performed this act, the spiky, blonde-haired teenager boy pulled the pin, releasing an enormous explosion straight towards our protagonist and his first demonic friend, destroying the surface of the walls and much of the floor with its sheer power. But Melo, she didn't move. She didn't run away like her female teammate. She was standing still, not moving even a single inch, but not because she thought she could tank the explosion. In fact, it was quite the opposite. She was paralyzed in fear, completely frightened by the pure power of the explosion that was about to hit her, and it would have certainly struck her, if not for Izuku leaping towards her, pushing her out of the way of the explosion, thus saving her from taking most of the damage from the explosion. But even with this selfless act, both Izuku and Melo got blasted away, getting flown away into a more open part of the building, with the former getting hat blasted away from his head and with both teenagers hitting the floor hard once they landed on it. The explosion was so strong that the whole building shook into it, A shockwave was felt even by the symbol of peace and the rest of Class 1A, including Uraraka, Melo, and Ida, with the explosion leaving a large hole in one of the walls in the more open part of the building that had windows on the walls as well. As the #1 hero of Japan desperately spoke to them through their wireless radios, wanting to know if his students were all right or not, with ringing in her ears, Melo sat up on the floor, holding her head with her right hand due to hitting into the floor when she touched it. Soon after she did this, she started to search for our young overlord, absolutely worrying for his well-being. She didn't have to look for long. Just after a few seconds, she set her vision upon Izuku, who was accompanied by Shadow, who possibly dodged the attack by simply turning himself into his shadow form, witnessing his master, freaking out in the process. And when the disguised imp girl looked at her best friend, she was taken aback in horror by what she saw. Her best friend, Izukumidoriya, whom she had known for around 10 years, was injured. His left forearm got burned by the heat of the explosion, holding it with his right hand in pain. Despite his hero costume having a layer that protected him from minor explosions, the explosion was so powerful that it destroyed his left glove and the left forearm part of his costume, even getting it burned a bit. Seeing her friend in a state like this, Melo immediately stood up from the ground and ran towards our dear hero, opening her mouth in the process. "Izuku!" the disguised imp cried out in fear as she proceeded to rush to Izuku's side, being so worried about his physical state that she called him by his name, not the nickname she gave to him, reaching him shortly after she said this. Then, she crouched down to his level and observed him, checking if he suffered any other injuries, which, fortunately, wasn't the case. But even despite this fact, Melo didn't calm down one bit. She felt ashamed of herself, blaming herself and being enraged at herself for not being able to get out of the explosion, thus causing her best friend to get injured because of her hesitation. As she and Shadow witnessed our dear hero with worry, with the former attempting to help Izuku stand up to his feet, they got interrupted by the voice of the explosion quirk user, making the trio look into the direction his voice came from. "Wow, the more it charges up, the bigger the explosion," Bakugou noted to himself in delight as he approached the duo through the smoke, his other gauntlet charged up, making both Izuku, Shadow, and Melo focus their attention on him, with our young Cambion doing it with afraidness, which emotion was signaled by his slightly tilted ears and tail, and his shadowy friend entering his protective mode once again, ready to protect his master. But Shadow was not the only one who was in such a state. Melo was enraged as well, feeling rage towards Bakugou for hurting Izuku and herself thanks to being the cause of her best friend's current condition. And as her rage grew, her form slowly started to change, with fire erupting from her hands and enveloping them, flaming in a violent manner, with her hair beginning to blow as it was moved by wind, with the end of her hair starting to turn into flames, with her arms and fingers starting to glow in a orangish, slightly reddish color scheme, forming a pattern on her arms that looked like as if her veins were filled with flowing, molten lava, and with an extra pair of eyes opening on her face above her original, all four vision acquiring the same reddish, orangish coloration as the patterns on her arms. Not wanting his best imp friend to blow her disguise unintentionally, he opened his mouth and spoke up, gaining the disguised imp girl's and Shadow's attention. "Don't stay here, Hensushita," Izuku said as he held his left hand in pain, making his first demonic stop in her transformation and causing her and Shadow to look at him. "Go after Uraraka. Shadow will go with you. Stick to the plan," he requested. "Are you crazy?" Melo questioned. "I can't just let you fight this psycho alone," she demanded, not wanting to leave Izuku with Bakugou alone at all. And just as she noted this, the explosion quirk user stepped out of the slowly vanishing smoke, having his regular serious, threatening expression on his face. Once his full body was visible, our protagonist's shadowy friend and the disguised set their eyes upon them, readying themselves for the upcoming confrontation, both of them being filled with pure rage for Bakugou daring to hurt Izuku like that and desiring to punish him for this. But they were stopped in this action by none other than the son of the radio demon himself. "Don't worry about me. I can handle him," our dear hero remarked with a small smile on his face, trying to assure his shadowy helper and best imp friend that he would be fine, ticking off the spiky, blonde-haired teenager boy with this remark of his. Despite his attempt to calm them down, Shadow and Melo didn't wish to leave Izuku's side. They desired to stay with him and fight alongside him against Bakugou, wanting to protect him, with the former wanting to shield every blow for the one who was responsible for his existence in the first place, and the latter wishing to correct her mistake of hesitation. But with Melo recognizing the fact that they had limited time left, and with Shadow knowing that it was a direct request from his master, they couldn't perform the action they wanted. But before they could leave Izuku, Shadow picked up the hat of his master, which was not blown too far away from their location, with his left hand and extended both of his hands towards, offering him a chance to get his vintage mic, which Shadow was still holding in his right hand, and his hat back and let him protect himself with the former and put the latter back on his head. Seeing the kind gesture of his shadowy helper, our young Cambion formed a smile on his face and grabbed his microphone with his left hand, flinching from the pain in his hand, took it out of Shadow's hand, and touched his hat with his right hand and put it back on his head. All the while the spiky, blonde-haired male adolescent observed them with growing rage, losing his patience more and more. Once Izuku took his old-fashioned mic back, Melo began to speak, drawing Izuku's attention. "Fine, just don't get yourself killed," the teenager imp girl with a human disguise remarked, not wishing for her closest friend to get even more injured. And thus, with a bit of uncertainty about leaving our young Cambion's side, Melo ran after the zero-gravity quirk user, with Shadow flying after her, thus leaving Izuku to go up against Bakugou all by himself. After our protagonist's shadowy friend and first demonic friend left the area, the explosion quirk user grinned his teeth in frustration, being enraged at the nerd's most recent comment, completely ignoring his teammates' questioning about whether he was the one who released the explosion or not. "So, you think you can handle me, huh?" Bakugou queried, opening his palms and aiming them at the floor. "Then try to handle this," he demanded, then created 2 explosions from his hands, shooting himself into the air and launching himself towards Izuku, attempting to kick him in the head with his right leg. Seeing the attack, our young overlord lifted his injured arm and blocked the strike with it, resulting in him experiencing even more pain. Then, our dear hero moved his left arm, and with the help of his microphone, he pushed his attacker away, causing Bakugou to fly in the air a little bit and touch the floor, landing on his feet. He was about to jolt towards our protagonist, wishing to strike with a hit from his right hand, but as he was about to do this, his body was suddenly hit by some kind of ray 4 times, making him take a few steps back. Once checking that he didn't have any kind of injuries from getting shot at, Bakugou raised his head and set his eyes upon the nerd he had been terrorizing for over a decade, doing this in pure rage. And when he performed this act, he, All Might, and the rest of Class 1A, who were in the monitor room, were shocked to see Izuku holding a ray gun in his right, which was the same weapon he got as a present from his demonic teacher, looking at the spiky, blonde-haired teenager with a confidence Bakugou had never seen before. After using his ray gun and putting it back to its original location, Izuku recognized that there was finally enough space for him to use his tentacles, causing him to touch his right thumb and right middle finger together and perform a snap with them. In an instant, 3 portals opened on the ground around Izuku, with one being positioned behind him and the other 2 being placed next to him, each of them having black-colored tentacles rising out of them, ready for the mere purpose they were summoned for by the son of the radio demon. He knew that with one of his hands occupied, he couldn't grab Bakugou with his tentacles, but he could still fight him with his tentacles. So, he gained control over the 3 tentacles, which was signaled by the light green aura that was around his hands and the tentacles and was present for just a few seconds. The explosion quirk user was enraged by witnessing this. Despite all the attempts he tried to scare the shit out of Izuku and make his bravery shatter, he somehow always gained his determination back, making Bakugou think that all the things he told him that day, such as he was not afraid of him despite shaking in his presence, were true. And Bakugou couldn't stand that. He wanted to remind the nerd of his place in the world and show him he was better than him, and Izuku's dream of becoming a hero was bullshit. But this bravery and confidence our young Cambion acquired didn't let him do this, causing the spiky, blonde-haired male teenager to obtain a wrath he couldn't contain anymore. He had to release it. And what better way to do that than letting it out on the person who was responsible for his anger in the first place? And so, with this rage being released, Bakugou moved his hands and launched himself into the air with explosions, flying in the direction of our protagonist with the intent of hurting him. In response, The son of the radio demon extended his left hand forward and pointed his vintage mic at bakugou, resulting in the 3 tentacles moving towards the explosion quirk user, thus marking the beginning of the battle between the 2 hero students. A battle that at the end could have only one who came out victorious. Meanwhile, as the 2 male adolescents battled between themselves, the disguised imp girl and the shadowy helper of our young overlord continued their journey in the direction the brown-haired teenager girl and the other 2 sentient shadows went, running through hallway after hallway and wanting to catch up with them as fast as they could, all the while worrying for our dear hero. Of course, Melo desired the win of her team, but due to the condition her best friend was in, it still felt bad for her to leave him to go up against bakugou like that. She wanted to protect him, but she knew that in order for his plan to be a success and for him to finally conquer his fear of the explosion quirk user, she had to do this for Izuku's sake. As these thoughts ran through her head, her vision got the attention of the zero-gravity quirk user and 2 other living shadows, being findable in front of a closed, grayish door. Seeing her female teammate in her sight, Melo moved her jaw muscles and opened her mouth, beginning to speak. "Uraraka," the disguised imp girl exclaimed, not loud enough to make the ex-Sumi student hear if he was nearby, but loud enough for the brown-haired to hear her, thus causing her and 2 shadows to turn their heads and set their eyes upon the duo. "Henzashita," Uraraka said as she looked at her teammate, feeling relieved for her arrival and for her well-being, but growing concerned after she saw that the 3rd member of the hero team was missing. "Where is Deku?" "He's got injured and he's fighting with bakugou right now," Melo replied, arriving at the zero-gravity quirk user's location in the process. "What?" the brown-haired female adolescent queried in shock, with her emotion being shared by the other 2 shadows as well, taken aback by the fact that Izuku got hurt. "I wanted to stay with him, but he convinced me and Shadow to get to you and go along with his plan," the disguised imp girl stated, still not thrilled about the fact that she had to leave her best friend alone and fight with the explosion quirk user. "Oh, I see," Uraraka replied, still a bit surprised by the whole situation. "Anyway, what are you doing here?" the disguised imp girl inquired, causing the brown-haired teenager girl to get out of her surprised state. "Oh, right, I think I found where Ida is and the bomb is held," she revealed, making her teammate happy with this vital information. "Sweet," Melo celebrated. "You've got your paper, right?" she wondered. "Yeah, I have it," Uraraka answered, pulling the paper with the voodoo symbol on it out of her right pocket and showing it off to her female teammate. "And yours?" "I have it too," the imp girl with a human disguise responded, moving her right hand to her right pocket and putting it into it, wishing to get her hands on the paper that was given to her by her best friend. But when she did this, there was nothing in her pocket, resulting in her adopting confusion on her face. "What the?" she said as she continued to look for her paper, not understanding why it was not in her pocket. She swore she put it into her right pocket after she received it, right before bakugou attacked, and that was the moment when the realization struck her. Her paper was not in her right pocket because when Izuku pushed her out of the way of the enormous explosion, it must have fallen out of her pocket, and it probably got destroyed into nothingness, thus not allowing her to get it back in any way. "Oh, fuck." The disguised imp girl cursed in shock as she faced the realization that she lost her paper forever. "What is it?" the zero-gravity quirk user asked. "I can't find my paper. That asshole bakugou must have destroyed it with his explosion," Melo declared, still baffled by the fact that the explosion destroyed her paper. "We need to rely on yours." "Okay," Uraraka replied, agreeing to go along with what her female teammate said. "Great. Now, let's get inside and get ourselves a bomb," the imp girl with a human disguise said, with her female teammate and the 3 shadows nodding their heads in response, wishing to do the same act as Melo, with the former putting her paper back inside her pocket. And with this, the group decided to approach the door that separated them from the bomb they had to secure, with the disguised imp girl grabbing the door handle and pushing it down, thus unlocking the door. After this, she opened the door wide enough to allow herself to put her head inside the room, wishing to take a look at it and desiring to know where exactly the bomb and its guardian were. The room acquired white walls and lots of large windows, allowing the sunlight to lighten up the room. There were many large pillars in the room as well, offering cover for the ones who wished to infiltrate the room. In the middle of the room, the main objective of the hero team was placed, having the shape and the size of a real bomb. And it was not left without any guard. Its protector, Ida Tenya, was findable in the room, showing his back to the door, offering a chance for the 2 team members and the 3 shadows to sneak inside the room without the engine quirk user's notice. Recognizing the opportunity, Melo quietly opened the door fully and sneaked inside the room without any noise, with Uraraka, shadows, and the 2 other shadows following her in this activity, and with Uraraka's shadow closing the door without any sound and catching up with the group after this. Then, they jolted quietly to the nearest pillar and hid behind it, observing the some student with their eyes in silence. They just had to use the paper that Uraraka had and get to the bomb and secure it. This was the only thing that separated them from victory, and due to them not having a lot of time at this point, they had to pull this off as fast as they could. As the zero-gravity quirk user was about to say the name of the symbol out loud, wishing to trigger its effect, which she didn't know what exactly it was, doing her part of our young overlord's plan. However, she was interrupted in this action by the Summy student suddenly speaking up, surprising not only Uraraka, but the rest of the group as well. Bakugou is natural at being bad, but that fits this training perfectly. Ida said to himself, then continued, then I must also devote myself to being a villain. He remarked, going on with his monologue, of course, this is another trial to turn me into a man who will not bring shame to the Ida family. The engine quirk user realized, wanting to prevent himself from bringing shame upon his family by not performing on the lesson well. Become a villain, be dyed with evil in order to become a hero, he told to himself, obtaining his usual serious tone. I am very evil now, the Summy student declared in a dramatic tone, embracing the idea of being a villain with too much seriousness. Hearing his speech, Melo just rolled their eyes in annoyance and in a sarcastic manner, sharing the same emotion with her shadow, knowing that Ida was just being his usual self, always thinking everything very seriously, all the while Shadow just observed him in silence, being used to his behavior. But for Uraraka and her shadow, their reaction was quite the opposite. They thought his seriousness was very funny, with the zero-gravity quirk user even releasing a loud laugh out of herself, accidentally revealing her presence to Ida and blowing the cover of the group, resulting in the Summy student focusing his attention on her. Have you arrived, Uraraka and Melo? Ida wondered, taking aback the group with this inquiry of his and making them leave their hiding place, with the brown-haired female adolescent doing it with a worried expression and the rest of the group performing this with seriousness, with the disguised imp girl even lifting her hands, readying herself for a fight. I see you have brought reinforcements with you, he remarked, then went on with his speech, but your attempt is meaningless. Heroes, I've prepared for you, the engine quirk user proclaimed with a serious tone. Since Uraraka's quirk allows her to float objects, I have put everything away from the floor. Now you can't play your little tricks, he declared, showing off the clean, empty floor that had nothing with the exception of the bomb on it to the group. You have blundered, heroes, he declared in an evil, too serious tone, releasing an evil, dramatic laugh after he said this. He's taking it very seriously, Uraraka noted with a worried tone. Yeah, Melo replied, sharing her female teammate's opinion. But despite being discovered, both Melo and Uraraka knew that they had to inform our young Cambion about their current situation and the fact that they found Ida and the bomb. So, with this, Uraraka moved her hand to the wireless radio in her ear, wishing to share their current situation with Izuku. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 9. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author MaxX69 on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.